Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Sandy Brown. Commissioner Randy Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Montesino.
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Here. Oh, we had a new one.
Commission Alternate Schifrin.
Here.
Commissioner Alternate Quinn. Commissioner Koenig.
Here.
Commissioner McPherson.
Here.
Commissioner Brown. Kristen Brown.
Which one?
Commissioner
Oh,
Kristen
sorry.
Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Pegler.
Here.
Commissioner Lynn.
Here.
And Commissioner McClendon. We're trying to get Caltrans on here.
I don't believe that I was called.
Oh, Commissioner Koenig.
No, Peterson.
Peterson.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Peterson. I apologize. I'm trying, community TV is going to be a little bit late, so I'm trying to run the cameras as well. So give me an additional second.
No worries. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to considering any AB 2449 just cause and emergency circumstances requests. Have any today?
We do not have any.
Okay. Do we have any additions or deletions to consent or regular agenda?
We have two handouts that were posted to the RTC website for item 21 and item 22.
Thank you. We'll go now to oral communication. An opportunity for any member of the public to address the commission on any item within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not already on. Please feel free to state your name if you'd like it. And we'll start with those in the room. Seeing no public comment in the room, we will go online. We will start with Jean Brocklebank and Michael Lewis.
There you go.
Good morning. I am addressing the rail corridor segment number 10. I'm asking that your commission at its January 2025 meeting discuss and then advise staff to rescind the letters it sent back in January 2024 to residents of two mobile home parks. Those RTC staff-generated letters told the residents whose individual homes abut the rail corridor on park property that they, the residents, not the property owners, had until June 2025 to remove their encroachments of the right-of-way. The problem is that the residents are not the property owners of the two parks. These are not resident-owned parks. The residents only rent the lot on which their homes sit. The responsibility for the encroachments over time lies with the real property owners who own and manage the parks. Consider the following. Residents have been living with this sword hanging over their heads for close to a year. They have nowhere to move their homes in this county. They have probably lost all the equity of their homes that sit on someone else's property, as who would buy their home now. They are afraid of what is before them, and they live with this anxiety and stress every single day. How would commissioners fare in such a situation? I ask that the RTC staff be directed to issue as soon as possible a rescission of the January 2024 letter to residents. Give these residents some peace of mind, even though they may have to deal with the upheaval of encroachment removal in a year or so. Additionally, the RTC staff should send the warning of encroachment removal letter, if it's not already done so, perhaps with a 3 to 6 month extension to the real property owners of the two parks. Thank you for considering my comments this morning.
Thank you. We'll go now to Brian People.
Hi, this is Brian Peoples with Trail Now. We're a local organization, been focused, existing for over a decade now, actually. And our charter is to build the coastal trail from Watsonville to Davenport in a timely, cost-effective, and eco-friendly manner. And I want to just remind this organization that you've been failing at that over the last decade. You've only built 1 mile in the last 12 years. Segment 7B and North Coast are years behind schedule. And Watsonville, you're never going to get a trail. You should come to reality with the current plan. It's not cost effective when you're spending $25 million per mile to build a 12-foot wide trail. Segment 7B is millions over budget, and the maintenance cost for that retaining wall and the graffiti is going to be very expensive. The ultimate trail is essentially not affordable, and that's what was built on segment B. It's a great example. And unfortunately, it's not eco-friendly either when you're cutting down heritage trees to sustain some old railroad tracks and building many concrete barriers. We're hoping that you would start building a trail with the removal and rail banking. Your current plan doesn't even meet your regulatory requirements for setbacks. You're designing an ultimate trail that doesn't even meet your setback requirements for a train. That shows how dysfunctional the RTC Commission is in designing the trail. So we're looking for and then secondly, you built the segment B, and you're not even going to have a train there. It's going to, the rail plan actually stops at Depot Station.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples.
Thank you.
We'll go now to Michael Saint.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Brown, commissioners and staff. Michael Saint, CFST, Aptos resident. I'd like to wish you all a happy holidays for this holiday season. During the last few weeks, a few of us mass transit advocates have been offering our opinions on what benefits a robust mass transit system should offer our citizens. The respondents are usually the same from all advocates. Safety is the key. We want convenience, low cost, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reliable and quiet, and promote a connected community. I would like to add one to that from a personal standpoint, would be the mass transit system that we choose must be comparable to the convenience of an automobile. To realize these benefits, we need transit on the rail corridor and in our neighborhoods. Buses sitting in congested traffic, whether it's on the freeway or surface streets, cannot draw people out of their cars. The transit system option has to bypass our current and future congested roadways. It must be faster than driving at rush hour in order to pull people out of their cars for its use. There was a study a few years ago by railsystem.net, which compared personal rapid transit to other public transit systems under the heading of ridership of attraction. It basically stated that if a PRT system designs deliver the claimed benefit of being substantially faster than cars in areas with heavy traffic, simulations suggest that PRT could attract many more automobile users and drivers other than public transportation systems. Standard mass transit simulations accurately predict only 2% of auto drivers will switch to trains.
Thank you, Mr. Saint.
Thank you for your time and for listening.
Any additional public comment? Okay, we'll return to the room. It looks like, and hi, welcome.
Hi, Jim Helmer, Ben Lomond. You've probably got to know that I come here quite often talking about problems or concerns, particularly in San Lorenzo Valley. But today I have some good news, I hope. And that is 12 years ago when Bruce McPherson sponsored a bus trip through Highway 9 with Caltrans, County, RTC, and so many local leaders. A few areas were pointed out as real problems. One of those was a redwood tree in Ben Lomond. And this tree has been struck several times, and there's really no safe passage for pedestrians to walk around that tree. When Director Eads took his role as Director of District 5 Caltrans, I got the opportunity to take him on a drive all through Highway 9. And we pointed out that tree and its history. It's a sad history. The good news is today there's a 2.7 mile stretch of Highway 9 being repaved from Felton to Ben Lomond. That's why I'm late. But Director Eady's told me that his project team on this repaving spoke with his safety branch and his operations branch, and the three of them concluded that they're going to restripe Highway 9 lanes around that tree to provide significant improvement for pedestrian safety. I think that's a testament to how important it is for commissioners, past, present, future, to get out there, see the problems firsthand, walk the talk, be persistent, and even though it's been 12 years for a simple striping change, I think it's a good positive movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back and we will move on to our consent agenda. Are there any questions about any items on the consent agenda, or does any commissioner want to remove? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none in the room, none online, we'll bring it back.
Move the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, catch the motion. Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll go now to our regular agenda, item 16, commissioner reports. Any reports from? Okay, seeing none, we'll go then to our director's report.
Good morning, commissioners. I have a short director's report this morning because we have quite a few recognitions, which is next on the agenda. So for the Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Milestone 3, we've been having a number of community information workshops to provide additional information and education to the community about the project and some of the elements. So the RTC will be hosting an informational community session on Monday, December 16th from 6 to 7. This will be focused on noise and quiet zones. Community members can join virtually via Zoom, or if you come to the RTC office, you could attend in person. And the sessions will be recorded and posted on the project website in the future. We are also planning a few more community information sessions in early 2025, including another session about ridership modeling, since we had so much engagement and interest in that topic. Also, we plan to talk a bit about cost estimating, because that's coming in early 2025, and community members are also encouraged to visit the virtual open house anytime through December 20th to participate and share their input on the project. And there's more to come on item 22 on the agenda that Riley will be providing to us today. Another note for the RTC, our offices are going to be closed to the public over the holidays. So December 23rd, which is a Monday, through January 2nd, which I believe is a Thursday, community members will still be able to reach the RTC staff via email and phone, and we'll have coverage there over the holiday. And that concludes my director's report.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, any public comment on the director's report? Seeing none in the room, any online? None online? Great, thank you. We will move on to item 18, appreciation for outgoing commissioners.
Thank you, Chair Brown. So we have several recognitions today. We have 5 commissioners and 2 alternates who we are recognizing today. So what we're going to do is verbally, recognize each commissioner or alternate, and then we could have, remarks, comments from commissioners, and then we'll bring you guys up and give you all your certificates at once. And then we'll take public comment, I suppose. So first up is Bruce McPherson, County Supervisor for District 5. We just want to thank you for your 12 years on the commission. Some notable actions that happened during that time. We really appreciate your advocacy to get Measure D passed. support for repair and maintenance of rural roadways and infrastructure following storms, complete streets improvements throughout San Lorenzo Valley, Highway 1 bus on shoulder auxiliary lanes projects, and dedicated service on the Budget and Administration Personnel Committee. We'd like to recognize both Bruce and Ginny, but first, if anyone else wants to comment or thank Bruce, if Bruce, you want to have a few words, it's up to you.
It's been a joy, sort of. No, it's been a really great time for me to serve on this commission. Probably as much as anything that I receive questions about is transportation-related issues. Time and time again, try to get to them as quickly as possible. Thank heavens the voters of Santa Cruz County passed Measure D 2016 to help us respond to some issues that we needed to face. Unfortunately, we've been hit, as we all know, with fires and floods and atmospheric rivers. It's really put a dent in what we can do and how quickly we can do it to serve the people and transportation needs. We have an interesting and, in essence, from the start, challenging transportation network in Santa Cruz County. I think that whatever we can do to make it better, the cooperation with Metro, which I serve on as well, has been terrific. I just want to thank the staff, legal team that we have, and everybody in the commission being open to discussion, really facing some very serious challenges we have. It's been a pleasure to serve on this commission. Have big challenges ahead, I know. Hope that you meet them well, and I'm sure you will. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner McPherson. Next is Virginia or Ginny Johnson. She is an alternate for Commissioner McPherson. We want to appreciate your 12 years of outstanding dedication and most notably for support of Highway 1 auxiliary lanes and bus on shoulder projects, Coastal Rail Trail, and supporting development of complete streets in San Lorenzo Valley as well, and serving as an alternate on the Budget and Administration Personnel Committee. So thank you, Ginny. Where is she? There you are. Thank you very much, Ginny. We really appreciate your dedication, public service, and advocacy for transportation needs in the region. Next is a commissioner that we don't get to see very often, Zach Friend, who's county supervisor for District 2. He's not able to make it this morning, but he has been on the Board of Supervisors for 12 years. He supported the Highway 1 SoCal Morrissey Auxiliary Lanes project and supported also passing Measure D. And he also represented the region on the California Association of Councils of Governments, or CalCog. So we appreciate him in that role as well. Alternate for Commissioner Friend is Rob Quinn, and we want to thank you for your 3 years serving as an alternate on the commission, public service and advocacy for transportation needs, and support for the Watsonville to Santa Cruz multimodal corridor program, improvements to facilities in District 2, and always being mindful of the needs and resources of the community. So we just want to recognize you, and if you'd like to say a few words or.
It was an honor when Zach nominated and appointed me to do this. And it's been a real pleasure and an education, even when I get yelled at in the parking lot at Safeway. I'm not a professional politician or a transportation planner. And so it's been a great education for me. I think my job as an outsider has been to ask questions. And my daytime job, I run the organization that provides the most Medicaid services in the state of California. And so my familiarity with the need to have stewardship and public accountability, I hope I brought to this committee. I feel it's my job to ask hard questions. And I think just like in healthcare, we have infinite demand and limited resources. And we need to be extremely deliberate and data-driven in every decision we make. And so I really appreciate the chance to have the opportunity to ask these questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving right along, we have Randy Johnson, who, there he is. Thank you. Who has been on our commission for 23 years. We want to appreciate your longevity, your public service and advocacy for transportation needs, help in passing the 2016 Measure D, support for our Highway 1 and bus on shoulder auxiliary lanes projects, acquisition of the branch line, which you were around for. I'm sure you've got stories. And repairs and maintenance of rural roadways infrastructure following storms, roadway rehabilitation and maintenance throughout the county, and faithful dedication to fiscal responsibility. So we want to appreciate you, Commissioner Johnson, for your 23 years of service.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I've served twice as long as this guy. I think he's gotten twice as much done, but that's another story. You know, longevity is kind of overstated. I did the math and I think I've done about 360 of these meetings. Don't gasp. I was the chair for 3 or 4 years back in, I think, 06 or 04, something like that. And it's been a pleasure. You know, I've often, as Dr. Quinn mentioned, asked some hard questions. But I think that type of vitality and getting things answered and asking those types of questions, I think leads to better decisions often. I don't like always being the voice in the wilderness. You know, to the point that the gentleman made about Bruce, you know, there are lots and lots of challenges that go up and beyond a rail corridor. I mean, people worry about potholes, they worry about their streets, they worry about safety, they worry about their kids walking to school, they worry about traffic nightmares, all the things that go into, quote, transportation. I think, you know, addressing those things at the same time, we just don't ever want to get to a point where, for example, the rail line just sucks the oxygen out of the room. We have to discuss other things. And so I trust that this, whoever replaces me and the other commissioners, that they will have those types of things on their minds. And again, I just want to thank all the commissioners. And I got along with everybody. Sometimes, again, I felt like I was a 1 versus 11 on certain occasions, but I really enjoyed my time here, and I appreciate you giving us the acknowledgement of being part of this commission. So thank you.
Okay, next up is Sandy Brown, who is appointee from City of Santa Cruz. Sandy's been on our commission for 7 years. We want to appreciate you for your advocacy for the region and the Santa Cruz community, support for coastal rail trail projects, active transportation, the support through the Unified Corridor Investment Study process, the rail transit planning and implementation, and dedication to public engagement and environmental sustainability. So we want to appreciate you, Commissioner Brown, for your 7 years.
Say a couple of words. First of all, I want to say that I absolutely agree with Commissioner Johnson's statements about the concern, you know, really thinking about the broad array of concerns related to transportation. You know, when I endorsed Measure D when I was running for office, you know, it was, for me, it was really potholes, buses, you know, how people move around the county. And I wasn't as involved in rail efforts, but I was appointed, and I've been very fortunate to be on this commission during the self-help years, the Measure D years, because it has given us a lot of, you know, more resources. We'll never have sufficient resources to meet all the needs, but it has made us, it has put us in a position to be able to really expand our efforts as a body. I recall my first commission meeting. I didn't have any experience in transportation. I just ended up on this commission, and kind of crapshoot of appointments among elected officials. And I have learned so much. And I remember my first meeting, Norm Hagen was a commissioner at the time, and I see head shaking. And he said, you know, and he was going off the commission, and he said, you know, I'm here making decisions. We're all here making decisions about what's going to, 40 years from now. It's not about what's happening today. Or it is about what's happening today, but we're making decisions and planning for a future that, we may not be around to, to see, but we have to be vigilant about that. We have to care enough to make decisions that matter for the entire community and for our future. And it's really stuck with me. And when I woke up in the middle of the night, it like came into my head as I thought about this last meeting. And I wanted to just say that that ethic of really wanting to invest in our future, however it affects us in the immediate, is what has kept me motivated to be here and to work. I hope I've done what I could during my time here, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next steps for the commission. And you will see me on the other side of the dais, I'm sure, from time to time. So thank you so much. I also want to really thank our staff. This position is coming in as a commissioner with, we don't come in with transportation expertise necessarily, and we have decisions to make that are super complex. And the staff of the commission has been so incredibly helpful to me. Your energy, your creativity, really, in the face of very challenging issues, and the way that you work together and your commitment to serving our community has made this job for me, worth it. So thank you so much. And to the public, keep supporting transportation, infrastructure funding, and to the future. We have lots to do.
Thank you. And lastly, we'd like to appreciate our chair, Kristen Brown, who's an appointee from Santa Cruz Metro. Thank you for your 4 years of dedication, public service, and advocacy, and advocating for the region and its transit needs. Thanks for the support on the Watsonville to Santa Cruz Multimodal Corridor Program and the Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Project, and improving and advancing public transit for the region. So we want to appreciate you, Chair Brown, and if you want to say a few words.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, it's been a wild 4 years here on the Regional Transportation Commission. Having served 8 years on Capitola City Council, 8 years on AMBAG, and 4 on Metro and 4 on RTC. Those 4 opportunities together have really taught me a lot and given me the opportunity how comprehensively transportation policy and planning truly is, from the state level to the regional and local. Truly learned a lot in my time here, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have done so. Thank you again to staff and to my fellow commissioners. It's been a pleasure to serve alongside you. It's been a pleasure to serve on the Metro board as well, because I am here as a Metro representative. The Regional Transportation Commission is one of the agencies I serve on that has the longest term horizon in terms of the things that we're planning for, looking towards in the future. So I really echo what Commissioner Sandy Brown was saying about how important it is to keep in mind that we're decades into the future. So these are projects we may not see in our lifetimes, but others may, and it's important to keep that in mind. Also, echoing Commissioner Sandy Brown, this is a farewell, and excuse me, this is not a farewell, this is a see you later. So I'm sure you'll see me on the other side, possibly making public comment or otherwise. So again, thank you for the opportunity. It's been.
Okay, and thank you all who are departing for the dedication, public service, and advocacy for the region. And if you could come up and receive your certificate of appreciation and take a couple of photos, that'd be great. and then we'll take public comment.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just really want to thank everyone. We're going to lose a lot with all that expertise, a lot of years, a lot of dedication from each and one of you. I mean, Randy, 23 years, you know, but the questions, the effort, that you have all brought to the commission over the years has put us in the right place. Because one of the things that we don't talk about is our successes. Rail line, you know, the highway, all the local roads, all the Measure D, all of this stuff that you've have all been part of. And I really want to thank you for your dedication, your commitment to the community, and you have made, you know, the transportation corridor in our community better for your commitment and your time being here. So thank you.
Any further comments from Commissioner? Okay, seeing none, we will go to public comment on this item. Is there any public comment?
Jim Helmer, Ben Lomond. Some of you may not know this, but in the 1970s and 80s, I was the city traffic engineer for the city of Santa Cruz. So I have my fingerprints on a few things down there. As Bruce would know, he was editor at the Sentinel at the time, and we'd have to try to figure out how we were going to explain this situation. But when Bruce took office with Jenny, thank you, Jenny, he contacted several people in the San Lorenzo Valley about critical issues. One which I recall, definitely I recall, he asked me, what are the most essential roadways in our valley? And I reeled off 11 or 12, 13 of them, which were so vitally important. If one goes down, we have to have the other one. And I think that from that point on, I realized he really cared about not only the rail, the trail, Roaring Camp, the, you know, Highway 1, Highway 9, but just the overall Santa Cruz County. And when he came to some leaders in San Lorenzo Valley and said, we have to pass Measure D, I think I can get some money carved out for Highway 9 if we do that. I believe that that lobbying for earmark of $10 million out of Measure D for Highway 9 San Lorenzo Valley was so instrumentally important to every one of us here, because we may not have passed Measure D without that extra boost in San Lorenzo Valley, which I think was a very high percentage of support based upon that carve out, which has benefited the entire county. So thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Jenny.
I didn't pay him to say anything. That and the wildlife crossing, really great.
Matt Farrell, I would just like to express my appreciation to all the commissioners for their service over the years. And again, mention the success of Measure D, which really reflected participation of very many stakeholders and true leadership to work out a compromise that resulted in that ballot measure. And I think I also want to recognize the women who have been participating on the Regional Transportation Commission, because historically the organization has been largely a male-led organization. So I want to thank you all for helping break that glass ceiling and moving us in a more equitable distribution of relationships. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further comments in the room? Seeing none, we'll go to, and we'll start with Brian Peoples.
Hi, this is Brian. So I want to first recognize Randy Johnson, who's a phenomenal commissioner, and he's always been on the single, asking the hard questions. So thank you, Randy, for your dedication. And Zach Frenno, not a lot of people may realize this, but I believe that Zach is the one that helped ensure Measure D, 2016 Measure D passed. And the reason is when the first language came out, there was 24% for the rail, and they had $14 million for the Monterey County train station. Well, Trail Now came out as a registered political action committee opposed to it. And Zach knew that we would likely lose Measure D. And so Zach went and changed the language to 8% for the rail and eliminated the 14%. And Trail Now moved to work with promoting Measure D. So that was a huge deal. And then the other thing great that Zach did is he brought in Dr. Rob Quinn, who really asked tough questions. And finally, Bruce McPherson and his smart advisor, Miss Johnson, really appreciate the hard questions they ask. And just in this room last meeting, I think Miss Johnson talked about the funding, and those were really hard questions asking. And they asked about the Coastal Commission, about can we even have a rail on the Coastal Commission? So they did do a great job asking tough questions. So really appreciate your work. So thanks again for all your work. That's it.
We'll go now to Michael Saint.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just had to hurry and write some comments down. I've been here about 8 years, so I've gotten to listen to quite a few of you respond that are leaving us, and it's a sad time for me. In a lot of occasions, I enjoy each and every one of you. I enjoyed Sandy Brown's openness and her real openness to different paths to take. It wasn't always locked into what all the other commissioners were expecting. And I know some of her decisions and voting was tough for her because it was not necessarily the direction that she really planned on going. Commissioner Randy Johnson, I appreciate your frugalness and not afraid to be the lone wolf amongst the commissioners. It was impressive to me, and it showed a lot of integrity. Bruce McPherson, of course, probably the most experienced politician as well as a public servant, and his experiences has been very necessary in getting things done, as Randy pointed out. Kristen Brown, relatively new. She's been here 4 years. Super impressed with her communication. And she always got back to me and also my advocates for Campaign for Sustainable Transportation. And most of the time the same day. So that's very impressive. I hope everyone could take a lesson and learn that from Commissioner Brown. Also, I'd like to mention Jenny. I ran into her the very first time when we were advocating for Monterey Bay Community Power. And I remember a Capitola meeting where we were the only two there. And she kept coming up to me in all these meetings at Monterey Bay Community Power and said, keep coming to these meetings and keep advocating. It's very important and we want to hear from you. Thank you all for your service and have happy holidays.
Thank you. We'll go now to Lowell Hurst.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just wanted to say thank you very much to all the commissioners for the improvements that have been made and the future planning. As Norm Hagan said many, many decades ago, what you do today, it may not bear fruit until 40 years from now, but in the process, great progress has been made and is going to be made. And so I want to thank you for never forgetting South County and the horrendous commute that so many people have to endure to get to their jobs and seek services. And so when it comes to improving local roads, Highway 152, Highway 129, and Highway 1 all bisect the city of Watsonville and have a great impact on local transportation. And my guess is that Watsonville community and South County has probably more miles, or the incorporated parts of South County have more miles of state highway than any other jurisdiction. But I want to say thank you for all the local work and the big picture work and trying to bring better transportation options to the community and making sure that there's equity and progress is being made. And so thank all of you for your service. We've been around a long time. We've seen a lot, and we're looking forward to great things happening. And it'll be very interesting to see how this all plays out. That's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Seeing no further public comment, we'll come back to the
Yeah, wanted to say a few words also of appreciation to the commissioners who are leaving. We've really experienced over recent years two missions. One of them brought the commission together, and the other was very, created really a rocky time. And my appreciation is that even where we disagreed, and sometimes the agreements were pretty substantial, the commission was able to work together. We were able to, all the commissioners were able to get past their particular positions or opposition to what other commissioners might be supporting and continue to treat each other with respect. And also I want to appreciate all the commissioners who, when the second Measure D failed, really that to their consideration. It had a real effect ability of the forward. So I appreciate the commissioners continuing to work together over the last years, and also their willingness to respect the vision of the public.
Any further comments by commissioner? Okay. With that, we're on to the election of chair and vice chair for 2025. The ad hoc committee was comprised of myself, Commissioner Koenig, Brown, Commissioner Rodkin. And we met to consider chair and vice chair for the coming year. We selected Felipe Hernandez and Commissioner Felipe Hernandez and Commissioner Eduardo Montesino. Upon discussion with the commissioners and the committee, we are recommending a vote to approve Commissioner Montesino as chair for 2025 and Commissioner Hernandez as vice chair for another term. And I'll let Commissioner Hernandez speak to why this is the recommendation that he remain vice chair for another term.
You know, there's two reasons. I think I feel like I'm pretty busy right now, and as board chair for the Board of Supervisors, I'm going to have additional tasks and duties, and it's going to take up a lot of time. And also there's going to be a lot of work to be done with this new administration at our county level and in the district that I represent, which is Watsonville. And so it's going to take the majority of my time dealing with these two things. And, usually the role of, serving to protect immigrants is not the role of the Board of Supervisors, but I think that it's going to be detrimental to our community and our district. So I'll have to pass on the duties of chair to Eduardo Montesino, and I would like to remain vice chair. And then next year I can take over the duties of chair.
Any questions from? Okay, seeing none, we will go to public comment. Any public comment in the room? Seeing none in the room, we will go online.
Move.
Oh, hold on, we have to get public comment online. And we'll start with Brian People.
I think this is great news that we have two representatives from Watsonville, South County. I'm hopeful that this will help drive our investment to improve transportation for that South County community. So congratulations. I think it's a phenomenal idea that we've got South County in the driver's seat, so to say. So thank you.
We'll go next to Lowellhurst.
Thank you very much. And I too think that's a great move to have this kind of representation that knows a lot and can get a lot done. All the team members there are super important, and I'm really glad to hear that there's progress being made, and this actually shows it today as well. So thanks for thinking of the broader issues and making great decisions, making them real. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Seeing no further public comment, we'll bring it back to the commission.
Move the recommendations from the subcommittee.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to seat Commissioner Eduardo Montesino as chair for 2025 and Commissioner Felipe Hernandez as vice chair. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. If it's okay with you, I'll just wrap this one up and hand it over. Okay. All right. Moving on now, we are going to go to item 20, which is our Caltrans report. Oh, it looks like you might still be muted.
Okay, sorry. How about now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. My name's Kelly McLennan. Good morning, commissioners. I'm a transportation planner with Caltrans District 5. I've got a couple of announcements this morning. First, I'm pleased to announce that last month, Caltrans sent RTC the notice to proceed for a recent $1.3 million grant that will study 4 climate vulnerable locations along the Santa Cruz branch line and also consider the feasibility of potential adaptation options for those 4 locations. So happy that that project is moving forward. My second announcement has to do with a couple of highway maintenance projects that we have in the works. As we heard a little bit earlier in public comment, one of these locations is on Highway 9 that is underway, and another location is Highway 1 near Watsonville. And the second part of this announcement is that those pavement projects need a specific window of temperature for a lot of the activities. So what we're encouraging folks to do is to monitor the Caltrans news releases and our social media channels to stay up to date for when those activities are going to occur based on weather and temperature conditions. And then as always, please drive cautiously through these work zones. And then finally, also on Highway 9, my last announcement has to do with an upcoming community event. We have another pavement project that will be in the works, and that project will be located in or near the community of Felton. And we'll be holding an open house style public meeting that will be for discussing the project scope and our environmental document for that project. And that meeting will be on Wednesday, January 15th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Felton Community Hall. the details, other details and further announcements are being finalized. So similar to the maintenance projects, please keep an eye on Caltrans social media and news releases for the final confirmation of that meeting and for further information. But as we do have that date and time locked in, Wednesday, January 15th, 5 to 7 at Felton Community Hall. Those are my announcements, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Oh, yes, go ahead.
It's really partially a question, partially a comment. I don't know how whether you're very aware of a beach on the North Coast called Shark Fin. It's become very popular, and visitors pulling off Highway 1 to go visit the beach are, creating an increasingly dangerous situation. The Shark Fin Beach itself is a state parks facility. The Segment 5 rail trail is running by that, but not in outside of the Caltrans right of way. And need for controlled parking at Shark Fin Beach is growing time. Our understanding is that Caltrans is not interested in taking on the project of creating the parking area. County is moving forward. Supervisor Cummings, Commissioner Cummings has been working with Public Works staff to start to put together a feasibility project and funding for a feasibility project. But the project will be in the Caltrans right of way. So I guess my comment is to really encourage Caltrans to work closely and supportively with the county staff. We would prefer Caltrans to do the project, but that didn't seem to be in the works. So the county's taking it over, but it will have to be approved by Caltrans, and we want to work with Caltrans every step of the way. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention. That's going to be moving forward over 2025 stage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from commissioners? Seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Any in the room? Any online? We'll go to Brian Peoples.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for the report. This is Brian from Trail Now. So you mentioned that Caltrans was funding the climate initiative for 4 locations on the branch line. And do you happen to know those specific areas? Maybe you don't, but I think it would be interesting to know that. And maybe that's going to come out in the January report by the RTCs. But where are those specific vulnerable locations on the branch line that you're referring to? Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't have that information in front of me.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further comment. All right, we are going to go ahead. Thank you so much, Kelly. We appreciate that. We are going to go ahead and move on to item 21, update on repairs to the Santa Cruz branch rail line damaged by previous severe winter storms in the county.
Good morning. Is the mic already on? Great. Riley Gerbrandt of your staff here. Thank you, Chair Brown and commissioners. We're here this morning, myself and Tracy New, to provide an update to the Santa Cruz branch rail line regarding the status of the 2017 and 2022 severe winter storms, on the update on the response and on the reimbursement. Next slide. So here's an agenda of what we'll be going through today. It's pretty brief. We're going to go through an overview of the status of the 2017 and 2023 storm damage repairs. We'll provide an update on the status of public assistance reimbursement. We'll go through staff recommendations and then next steps. Next slide. So at the beginning of this presentation, I'll just note that staff is coming to the commission at the request of the commission for an update on these specific elements and these items. On the slide here is just a brief overview of the 2017 storm damages and repairs. I'll go through just briefly the 2017 damages and then the 2023 damages, then get on to the status of their other elements. So in 2017, there was a series of severe atmospheric storm events. For those of us who were here and lived through it, it was pretty dramatic. There was widespread damages on the Santa Cruz Branch rail line. There were embankment washouts, a lot of debris, culvert damages, bridge damage, et cetera. And there were, at the end of the going through the analysis and review of the damages on the branch line, ended up with 7 specific storm damage repair sites that were identified. And on the screen is a map of the Santa Cruz Branch rail line, not the entirety of it, but where the 7 locations were that were damaged. Next slide. So on the screen, just for some history, is a couple of the sites that were damaged. This specific one is in Harkins Slough. It's site number 1, where there was a washout of the railroad embankment, and that was repaired with a new culvert. The response to these damages and the storms occurred immediately after the events. Disaster declarations were declared state, local, and federal levels, and the RTCs submitted applications for assistance to Cal OES, the California Office of Emergency Services, and to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and those were approved. And by January 2022, all 7 of the specific storm damage locations had been repaired and completed. Next slide. So here's another couple sites that were damaged. Site number 2 near Harkins Slough, again, a washout that was replaced by a new culvert. And site number 4 up by milepost 23, just north of Santa Cruz, where there was embankment damage that was repaired. So initial funding, and we'll get into the funding part of it now. Initial funding for these repairs were through Measure D rail category. But in the April 2018 commission meeting, the commission approved short-term interest-free borrowing from the Regional Surface Transportation Exchange Fund, or RSTPX, to pay for the storm damage repairs until reimbursement could be received from Cal OES and FEMA. And that was Resolution 1818. And to date on the 2017 storms, there's been just over $5 million spent on project costs. Next slide. So now moving into the 2023 storm damages and repairs. Again, Santa Cruz County was hit by a series of atmospheric rivers, and again, widespread severe damages, and major disaster declarations were declared, and staff were authorized to address the emergency storm damages. And we were approved once again for into the public assistance programs by Cal OES and FEMA. And just on the slide here are a few of the locations that were damaged or had debris on the rail line. The green dots are places where there was vegetative debris and trees that maybe fell down, and the other ones were other category damages. Next slide. So just a few pictures again. There was a washout at milepost 8.49 on the screen. A tree fell on the railroad bridge over the entrance to New Brighton State Beach. And again, fallen trees on the rail line. There were emergency embankment repairs done, 2 embankment washout repairs, a culvert repair, emergency protective measures and debris removal. And to date, about 1.25 million has been spent on 2023 storm damage project costs. Next slide. So now we'll move into the reimbursement status and how we're working with FEMA. Next slide. So on the slide here is just a summary of the expenses to date, broken down a little bit. It's small, but I'll break it down a little bit on the following slides. But in summary, the approach for addressing these damages and funding them has been to utilize the funding borrowed from RSTPX reserves in order to complete the repairs and then pay back the RSTPX fund once we receive disaster relief reimbursements. Next slide. For 2017 specifically, we were obligated from FEMA just over $500,000 towards the repairs. Again, there was over $5 million in project costs for these repairs. Staff has submitted all of the necessary documentation to FEMA and supporting documentation for all eligible work, and has been very, coordinating and collaborating with FEMA very closely, providing all the information that they've been requested. So far, FEMA and Cal OES have not approved reimbursement for any of the excess $4 million, almost 4.8 million in projects costs that exceed the obligated amounts. We have been paid for almost 500,000 to date for these damages from FEMA and Cal OES. They have retained about 70,000 as a retainer. And staff continues to engage with Cal OES and FEMA to obtain reimbursement for all eligible costs. Next slide. For 2023, as I mentioned before, we were approved our request for disaster assistance for both of the storm events in 2023. And to date, the project costs, as I mentioned before, were just over 1.2 million. And this was paid from short-term loan from RSTPX. Next slide. And then to wrap that up, FEMA has not progressed, for 2023 project formulation for the storm damage repair projects, citing concerns about the eligibility of the branch line facility in the public assistance program. Staff has coordinated very closely with FEMA and Cal OES, providing all the documentation that they've needed and requested on various different occasions, met with them specifically and met with some of the upper level staff on 2 occasions to address concerns and ask some questions of their staff about how they're approaching the project formulations. So far, we had 1 initially and heard some positive comments back from FEMA, and then ultimately they came back and said, we don't think you're eligible. Met with them again, and we're still trying to progress those conversations with FEMA. There's some positive movement, but we don't have a level of optimism about successful reimbursement from FEMA, that we're still trying to engage with them. On October 15th, staff received a determination memorandum from FEMA regarding the eligibility of one of the 2023 storm damage sites. That's the damage to the bridge over New Brighton State Beach entrance. They issued a determination that the facility is ineligible for disaster assistance, citing concerns about the active use of the rail line at the beginning of the incident period. And as I mentioned, staff continues to engage with FEMA as closely as they can. We've heard from staff at FEMA that they are in the process of preparing determination memos for all the remaining projects, storm damage repair projects for 2023. The determinations are not expected to impact the 2017 eligibility for storm damage repair funds. And we don't know yet how it'll affect any eligibility for assistance from Cal OES. Next slide. So next slide. Now with our recommendations, just a little bit of background. Again, almost $5 million has been borrowed from RSTPX reserves in order to complete the repair damages, with the intent of paying back RSTPX when the commission receives disaster reimbursement from state and federal government. These reimbursements are taking longer than anticipated and having more challenges than anticipated than when the short-term borrowing was originally authorized. Measure D rail does not have sufficient pay-as-you-go capacity in the short term to fund repairs in the event that full reimbursement is not received. We can refer you back to, I think, the November meeting where we talked about the capacity of Measure D rail at the moment. And the next slide is our recommendations from staff. So today, staff recommends that the commission adopt a resolution approving long-term interest-free borrowing from RSTPX to pay for the storm damage repairs until reimbursement is received from Cal OES and FEMA. If partial reimbursement is received, the difference would then be able to be paid out of Measure D rail through future programming action. The long-term interest-free borrowing ability from RSTPX would help alleviate Measure D constraints if full reimbursement is not received. Next slide. So next steps to wrap it up, staff plans to continue to engage with FEMA. We plan to submit an appeal to the determination memo by the deadline of October 14th to appeal that decision. We will return to the commission as more information becomes available regarding eligibility and reimbursement status. Again, if full reimbursement is not received, staff would return at that point with a recommendation to the commission regarding future programming actions for long-term RSTPX repayment. And I also want to mention that planning efforts are underway by staff to address climate vulnerability of the branch line. One in particular is the climate adaptation vulnerability assessment that staff is working with the County of Santa Cruz staff to complete. And that's for the unincorporated areas of Santa Cruz County, maintained roads, and the branch line. And a report will be provided at the January 2025 commission meeting concluding that CALA planning effort. And that ends the presentation. Myself and Tracy are here if you guys have any questions that we can answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gerbrand, for the report. This is a pretty significant amount of money that we so far have not been reimbursed. I'm particularly concerned about the 2017 amount. Can you provide any more, or I should say, has Cal OES or FEMA provided any more color as to why they've only reimbursed us $563,000 with instead of the 3.6 million or so requested?
The original obligation has been paid with the withholding retention withheld until the project's closed out. We submitted our complete package with all of the improvements, including the additional costs for the full project completion. And it took Cal OES about 2 years to review and then submit to FEMA for final determination. And we continue every month to contact FEMA to see where it's at, and we have not had any response. They have confirmed that they've received everything they need and they've made the recommendation to FEMA.
I see. Okay, so in this case, it's sort of just the standard wait times, it sounds like. I mean, of course, we're dealing with this at the county level as well. I mean, we're still owed, I think at this point, $80 million or so. So doesn't come as a surprise. But so what I'm hearing you say is we have a reasonable expectation of actually receiving the rest of the money for the 2017 storms, or at least what we asked for. And really the big question mark is just 2023.
I can't answer that in full. I don't know what the expectation is from the full reimbursement, but I do have a level of confidence that we will get some of it reimbursed. The project costs are a lot more than what was originally obligated, but all of the repairs were necessary for our branch rail line. So when we worked with Cal OES, we provided a lot of documentation and a lot of support for all the repairs that we made. And it's just up to FEMA to determine whether they're accepting those.
Okay.
Similar to the project for 2023, FEMA isn't always as easy to decipher where their standards are in terms of the project costs and agency. I want to say standards, but the rail line that we are repairing has standards that may be required by our agency, and then FEMA has to accept our reasoning. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, I understand. And then my other question is, I mean, you point out that this money, if we don't receive reimbursement, ultimately would come out of the Measure D rail fund. Of course, the trail fund is actually the one responsible for regular maintenance. I mean, I assume the distinction here is that this is actually damage to the rail line itself, and therefore that's why it's coming from the rail fund. Are there, just refresh my memory, I think there was some other storm cleanup that may ultimately have been paid for out of the trail fund because it wasn't actually damage to the track itself. Is that correct?
Correct. We use the trail fund for the corridor maintenance, which is in the right of way, and then the rail infrastructure, which are the tracks, we use the rail fund. It is also, the rail repairs are eligible for other funding that the RTC programs, but that is not what we're asking for right now.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Schifrin and then Commissioner Pearson and then
As board members, supervisors know, FEMA has been extremely difficult to work with. County had to borrow multi-million dollars to keep its operation afloat based on the slowness in FEMA reimbursement. So this is not usual in response to these storms. And it's unfortunate, and it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money at the county as well, and they're slowly starting to pay out. As you know, with the disasters around the country, FEMA's been pretty overwhelmed. Budget's been pretty overwhelmed. So things are slow, and they're slow anyway. I worked for FEMA for a number of years part-time after sort of going out after disasters. And, you know, the whole issue of getting FEMA to agree to pay for public improvements, they tend to be very rigid, very slow, and very nitpicky. My experience, and I talked to executive director about this, some communities that I worked in hired consultant firms with experience fighting with FEMA and knowing exactly details and history of implementation of the Stafford Act, which is what FEMA uses to determine what's eligible and what's not eligible. And so I suggested to the executive director of trying to get one of these firms on board to help the commission. We charge money, but in the end, it can be very cost effective in terms of getting a higher level of reimbursement because we need the money. FEMA is just there. You can drag it out as long as they want. Require lots of, additional information and deals, and the commission staff, we know what we deserve to get. You know what we deserve. Making sure it fits into the right box at the right way is something that may be helpful to get some assistance with. So I think what's going on here is not unusual, unfortunately, in recent years. I certainly support the staff recommendation here because I think it's worth pushing forward and putting pressure on FEMA and working with our federal representatives to help put pressure on FEMA, give the reimbursement to the agency that it deserves.
Thank you. Thank you for your persistence in trying to go after FEMA. It's a daunting task. There's disasters throughout the nation and they're all over the place. But one statement here, it says that FEMA said that the Santa Cruz Branch Rail Line was an ineligible facility, citing that it is not an active use, and it won't be an active use for quite some time. So even if how much does that thwart our efforts to get any kind of money in this regard? Because if that's not going to be in use, who knows how long.
Well, we do want to be aware of what they determine active use to be versus what we might consider active use to be. And that's one of the challenges we've had with FEMA is some of the statements that have been made in the community and elsewhere about the use of the branch line versus what it can do. So to your point, it definitely makes a challenge. Like that, the fact that there's not regular freight service on the branch line right now makes it challenging. If we had trains going by daily, it would be a different story. One of the challenges we have is in responding to the 2017 storm damages, the branch line was out of service because trains couldn't pass through due to the damages. When we got the branch line back to, repaired those locations, January 22 was when that, finally finished the last site. There was an effort by staff and by the commission to make the branch line available for use again to the operator. That time frame between that time and when disasters occurred meant that FEMA has concerns about the active use of the rail line. We've talked to them about it is an active rail line in terms of federal designations and how the Surface Transportation Board look at it. So we're definitely educating FEMA in a lot of ways about their branch line and its use. But to your point, yeah, it makes it challenging.
Well, my questions were asked and answered to the best of our abilities at the moment, it seems. But I did just want to say that I think that, the grand irony of the line not being in use as a result of 2017 storms, we weren't able to make the repairs and get it back into use, in part because of the challenges with FEMA reimbursements. So it's a grand irony to say, well, it's not in use. As of the 2023 storm, it couldn't be used because we couldn't get those repairs done. And it is unfortunate. I think Commissioner Schifrin described the challenges in even kind of under ordinary circumstances, but we are heading into a time where, we don't know how much worse it might get with FEMA. I just be, real honest here. And so I think that I just want to put in my support for the idea of trying to get some assistance from folks who really know how to deal with FEMA and make sure those boxes are checked sooner than later, because, we honestly don't know if there's going to be a FEMA in a couple of years. I don't want to sound alarmist, but, things could change and they're certainly not going to get any easier in the short term. So it just feels like it would be worth it to get some assistance with that. And thank you for all the work that you've been doing, try to navigate that very challenging process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I find it a little bit ironic that you make the statement that you're trying to educate FEMA, and the reverse is true. They're pretty much educating this commission that, I don't know if the door is slammed shut, but, breaking it open and peeking through to see if there are opportunities to reclaim and get payment. I think we're being a little sanguine about whether or not that's going to happen. What makes you think, heart of hearts, that things are going to change and money is going to be reimbursed? To me, it just seems like a very, very long shot.
So when I say educating FEMA, this might, what's it called when you have a story that makes a point or something, whatever that term is.
It's called fiction.
No, a story of what happened. So when we reached out to FEMA, April of 2023, when they first gave concerns about the eligibility of the facility, and there's a distinction between eligibility of the agency, the RTC, and eligibility of a facility and eligibility of costs. And there's kind of this pyramid that FEMA has in their public assistance program policy guide. When it comes to the eligibility of the facility, we, they expressed concerns. We provided a lot of information. Initially, it was about maintenance of the facility. So they were concerned that we hadn't been maintaining the facility. So we met with them, provided a lot of additional documentation. Initially, staff at FEMA were of one ilk and had some of their opinions. But then we were able to meet with some of the superiors, and in that meeting, everything changed. And we were then proceeding under the understanding that the facility was eligible, that they approved of our maintenance work on the the branch line. And then later on, the same old story came back, but this time in a different flavor. This time about the active use of the facility. And again, I think that we provided a lot of information that was requested through RFIs June of this year. And then we've been trying to meet with FEMA to discuss them for several months. And we ultimately were able to meet with FEMA staff and their superiors again. And in that meeting, the same process happened again, where we met with the supervisors and they said, well, this sounds like it's a different story. And then one of the supervisors actually, in fact, said like, oh, this was the same thing we went through in 2017, and we approved the facility then. So it's just the way that FEMA moves and processes things is, to some extent, it's a black box, and you do your best to tick the boxes correctly and do it in the appropriate manner. But ultimately, they go and make a decision and issue their decision, and then we have to either appeal that decision and provide additional information or accept their decision. So given the way that we interact with FEMA and FEMA works, there's a level of concern, but when you actually talk to some of the staff there, then that gives you some optimism. So you got to we're weighing those different balances.
So it sounds a little bit like incremental progress. You want to, instead of 1 step forward and 2 steps back, you want to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's interesting, Commissioner Schifrin's idea of, consultants. Consultants are expensive. But sometimes just the smallest matter of contacts, people who know people. We found that in the city of Scotts Valley, sometimes just having one person who knows another person kind of, gets through all the nonsense, the lack of response. So, I'm not really opposed to at least exploring something. I mean, at 250 per, sometimes they can be, unless you get your money's worth, it's not a good investment. But sometimes those things do make a difference. So I'd be open to at least exploring that. Thank you.
If I could just add a little bit, in terms of the educational process that we've been going through, it's not common that, public agencies own freight railroads. So FEMA, the staff on FEMA staff, they're used to, washouts on roadways. And so that has been one unique element about our disaster relief request, has been because it's a publicly owned, single track freight line. And, they're not experts in railroad regulations. So that's one element of it. And then we have been considering, we've been in touch with all of our, county staff and other local agency staff to try to, together figure out best practices of how we could maybe be more strategic with our efforts. And we are pursuing, options for bringing on professional consultants, but it does, unfortunately, the deadline to appeal is, I think it's next week. So we won't be able to have somebody on board by then, but it is something that we're considering, and we are collaborating with the other, eligible folks within our county and throughout the state to try to figure out, best practices of how we could recover some of these funds. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
So a name from the past, Progressive Rail. Were they the short line operator when all these things happened?
Yes, their contract started in 2018. So after the 2017 storms, they were.
We've already committed future Measure D railroad funds for projects. Do we know how, in a worst case scenario, this extra burden on future spending is going to impact the cash flow for the other projects?
It would definitely impact future projects because we're only programming 5 years ahead and we have years of needs. I did want to add that with Cal OES and FEMA and the rail requests for reimbursement, I've been involved since I started in 2019, so I wasn't here originally with the meeting. The support from FEMA now is so much more involved with the portal and everything. We were really working with someone that wasn't always as responsive as we needed to be or gave us guidance. But since we returned submitted our package with our final completion and our request, we've been working with Cal OES for 2 years trying to get them to understand, the difference between maintaining, improving, and bringing it to standards. And it wasn't until a former director, Gillarducci, was at Cal OES that he understood a little bit about rail. He jumped in, he reviewed the package, and it finally got submitted to FEMA because it was really outside of their realm of expertise in the department. So since then, that package has been recommended for approval and submitted to FEMA, and that's where we're waiting. And we're just being told that it's going to take a very long time. It's been with them about 6 months now. So we're expecting maybe a response in the next year and a half. I know that doesn't sound good, but we did work closely with Cal OES to explain to them what our rail line was used for, if it was active. Maintaining the rail line was also supported by the previous FEMA representative who deemed it an active line in 2017. He said maintaining and repairing the rail line for future freight use is like maintaining a highway or, roads. You still have to do it even if not all of those parts are being used. So there is some level of confidence, but FEMA is very rigid, like you said. So thank you, Commissioner Schifrin, for mentioning that. They're very succinct in what they feel is acceptable.
So, I mean, clearly, we have to support pushing FEMA, but I think this is incomplete if it's not coupled with the impact on future spending of already committed Measure D railroad.
Just to respond to that, so we understand that the reimbursement is at risk, but the amount is uncertain. And so as additional information comes forward and we find out more about, whether there is a partial amount, understanding what that amount is going to help us determine kind of the real impact, right, on the projects. But we are looking at options, if that does happen, to pay it back over time, which will be less of a burden on our projects. Obviously, we have a lot of needs on the branch line. We don't want to use up all of our pay-as-you-go capacity if we could help it. That's why we would most likely in the future, if this does occur, that we would recommend paying it back over time. But it is uncertain at this time, so.
Commissioner Koenig.
Thank you, Chair. Just talking about money and capacity, what is the capacity of the RSTPX fund? And I assume that is, if we're talking about our local balance here, then I assume that's that fluctuates significantly as we receive money, and then as the projects that are approved and the consolidated call for projects draw that money down. What is sort of what is the current capacity, and what's sort of the trough or low point when most of the projects have been completed, but before we've received money from the next cycle?
Every year we receive an allocation on RSTPX, and it's about $3 to $4 million per year. We generally have a very high fund balance that is earning interest and waiting for the public agencies that have been programmed money to submit for reimbursement. A lot of times we carry a balance of $7 to $10 million waiting for these projects, because even though we do a cycle of 3 years, a lot of times the projects don't ask for reimbursement for many years after.
Okay, and what's our current fund balance?
It is $11 million.
Thank you. So it sounds like, and that's of course after already paying contractors for this work that, we're now trying to get reimbursed from FEMA for. It sounds like we're able to manage the problem currently, but if we continue to see this be an issue and longer timelines to being repaid, we could even begin to come up against limits with our capacity with the RSTPX fund.
Correct. Right, any further comments from? Okay, with that, we will go to public comment. Start with those in the room.
Good morning. My name's Matt Farrell, and I'm speaking for myself this morning. Having worked in public service for the city of Santa Cruz during the 1982 flood, I want to extend my greatest sympathy and understanding of the challenges that RTC staff is facing around FEMA reimbursement. It's a torturous process. It's bureaucratic and has been described earlier, a black box. I want to also thank Commissioner Schifrin for sharing his experience in working for the agency and suggesting an additional strategy on how to perform better in this struggle. And thank Executive Director Christensen for commenting that they're going to work on that. This is really, I think, one of the problems of the climate crisis right now is that we are going to see more emergencies, and they're going to impact the funding that we have made as a society in addressing these climate crises. And so we need to be cognizant of that too, that this isn't just, it's a problem at the county, and it's a problem at local agencies, and it's a problem across the country. So I think we need to persevere, but we need to also change our priorities as a society. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Becky Steinbruner. I'm a resident of rural Aptos. This is concerning news, and it is not unusual. What I think this commission could do to help convince the FEMA and OES that this rail line will be used is to begin a pilot project. The Coast Futuro was wildly popular. There are ideas such as PRTs, bus on rail that could be done in limited sections of the rail line that I believe would be very popular with the public, considering the second Measure D results, and also would be a good faith effort to show FEMA and OES that yes, there will be a train. There will be something, not just endless studies about it. And let's get moving on something, even in a small section. And I think that will do tremendous value, a benefit to convince that these FEMA reimbursements need to happen. We have a fabulous partner, Roaring Camp Railroad, that I'm sure would be willing to help. They already have been. And let's not keep it paralyzed with inactivity and study. Let's get going on something, even in a short area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Helmer, Ben Lomond. I think redundancy is extremely important, whether you're moving people, goods, or freight. And when I look at the Highway 1 corridor, we are blessed to have a highway, actually, state highway that carries so much traffic from South County to Central and North County. But it's critical to have that redundant backup, and that's the railroad tracks. Just hearing this testimony and keeping track of this over the last several years, it would seem as though any effort we could make to move some rail movements from Pajaro, Watsonville, as far north as we could, whether it's just an engine and a couple freight cars behind it. But if we could move something and make that an active track, move some freight if we can't move passengers, and let's get it activated. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further comment in the room, we will go online. Start with Brian Peoples.
Hi, this is Brian Peoples with Trail Now. The railroad tracks have been inactive for years, and they're not getting reactivated. Many of the trestles are already shot, Capitola trestles. So the idea of us reactivating it is is a lost cause. If you remember when Iowa Pacific was operating, they got a violation because they didn't recertify it as a class 1. That's what needs to happen. It's actually pretty concerning that any transportational professional or commissioner believes that we will have freight in the future from Watsonville into the boardwalk into Santa Cruz. Just believing that, it's easy to understand that you don't understand transportation. You don't understand the freight business. And that's very concerning. So I would look at this as more of a, you know what? The government has recognized that this rail line has been abandoned. This recognition should actually be leveraged as part of our effort to rail bank it. At the end of the day, what we need to do is improve that corridor so it's basically so it doesn't fall apart when the next storm hits. Let's invest in that corridor. Let's essentially make it a road, right? We need to invest in it so we don't keep having these losses, because you're going to have climate change is real. We're going to get a lot more storms and it's going to get washed out. So let's fix and open it all the way up to Watsonville. Those tracks are worth $5 million in recycle value. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll go next to Lowell Hurst.
Thank you very much. Supervisors know and have some experience with FEMA. We've seen it repeatedly for decades, and I think it's been pointed out that you really need some help with an appeal that has some meat potatoes to it. It's more than certainly a grand irony. It's a big, giant catch-22 when there's no funding due to active use, and there was no active use because there were no repairs. I think that the commission needs to drill down a little bit and find out who was supposed to make those repairs, who can make those repairs, and get the line fixed and put it to use. There's certainly many opportunities for freight to be delivered, especially with the building that's going on in Santa Cruz. A lot of rock, gravel, and cement is going to be needed, steel, lumber. There's opportunities here. So let's get moving. Let's get some professional help for an appeal process that is going to set the stage for other appeal processes. This is not the end of your relationship with FEMA. A lot more work needs to be done. So find some help and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go now to Jocelyn Wolf.
My name is Jocelyn Wolf. I'm a Santa Cruz City resident. This body has the opportunity to make a huge positive difference in the future of this county. We're in a climate emergency. It's my opinion that we need to take as many cars off the freeway as we possibly can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that means making it as convenient as possible for people to take the train. We have the chance here to do something truly great for Santa Cruz County in the future. This is public infrastructure. This is moving people in a way that is more sustainable and more eco-friendly. We are in a climate emergency, and so reducing the number of people driving cars is incumbent on us. It is baffling to me that we're considering not having as many passenger rail stops as are necessary. The ones in Watsonville should be convenient for people to use to incentivize them to take rail, to take public transit instead of being in cars. And the same thing for West Side Santa Cruz. I want people to be able to use this train, and I want people to be able to benefit from that kind of service instead of being stuck in cars and traffic. I really appreciate your considered deliberation on this, and I hope that you'll make the right choice. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go next to Anna.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. I would just like to second what the speaker in front of me just said, which is that I think rail lines and other public transportation is desperately needed here in Santa Cruz. I have grown up here. I'm now in my 30s, and I've seen traffic just grow and grow every year, and the highway widening has not helped reduce that. I think we need public transportation as the only sustainable alternative, and I think a rail is one wonderful way to do that. I think we need as many stops as possible along that route to make it as popular as possible. Otherwise, we might end up having a rail system that only serves a few people and thus isn't used. So I strongly encourage the commission to add as many stops in Watsonville and also to extend all the way to the west side of Santa Cruz. I live here on the west side of Santa Cruz, and I would very much like a way to visit my family in Watsonville, as well as to get to places, businesses, and places of work. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's we should RS good if on from there to the next item, which
Okay. Okay. Well, we're at the, well, we have one more individual on public comment. Mr. Michael Saint.
Thank you, Chair Brown. Wasn't going to really speak here until I heard the last few speakers. I hope we all haven't forgotten that we've had an election back in November and that the political atmosphere and environment's going to change pretty drastically. And one of the biggest emphasis that the future administration is emphasizing is efficiency and cutting costs. And I think this is going to have a big effect on FEMA as well as other environmental programs. As we recall, the present elected president back in 2016, when he was president, promised infrastructure building and to do what he can to get jobs and people to work. That infrastructure building did not happen under his presidency. And I don't think it's going to happen again. And as a matter of fact, President Biden has done a great job with infrastructure. And he's at a point, the president-elect coming up is at a point of canceling a lot of those programs. So it's going to be tough. And I think the funding is going to have to wait at least 4 years for another administration to even consider it. And there is a chance FEMA will be no longer around. Just my opinion, and wish you all the best of luck. And thank you for all your duty and all the work that you're accomplishing. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Rodell?
Hi, good morning. I'm a resident of Watsonville, and I think we should be investing in this train and do everything that needs to happen so that way that the residents of not just Watsonville, Pajaro, and all the surrounding areas can get access to a train system. And it's just very important now that we navigate through this rapidly changing world that we need to be sustainable, efficient, and reliable with our transportation. And right now it's obvious that we need to invest in it because a couple of years we did have a storm. And if we don't start investing in our infrastructure, we are definitely going to pay for it in the future. And that is all.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will close public comment and bring it back to the committee.
I think it's critical.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is that what that was? Did we just have an earthquake? Yes. Humboldt just got a 6.7. So we have a motion in a second. Do we need to evacuate for any reason? Or are we good to move on? Or I don't want to move forward if we're not in a safe situation. We're good? Okay. Our Scotts Valley representatives who are in this building more often than us are telling us we're okay. I trust them.
Chair Brown, would you mind telling us who the first, and I know Commissioner Montesino was the second?
Yeah, Montesino was the second. I think I missed the first. Was it Schifrin? Yes. Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we're going to move on to item 22, our public hearing on the zero emission passenger rail and trail project milestone 3 public hearing.
I'm back. All right. Once again, good morning, Commissioners, Chair Brown, and appreciate the opportunity to provide an update to you about the zero emission passenger rail and trail project and its current status in the project concept development. So I just wanted to start off with the staff recommendations for today. Staff recommendations for this item are to receive a presentation, this informational presentation, to hold a public hearing and provide input on milestone 3 of the project concept development. Holding a public hearing will provide both the commission and the public an opportunity to share thoughts and feedback and input regarding the information presented here today in this presentation and update, as well as on the workshops and information sessions that we've had and on the virtual open house that have been ongoing in the last couple of months regarding milestone 3 project development. Next slide, please. Okay, so just briefly, as you know, the zero emission passenger rail and trail project aims to bring high capacity passenger rail service to 22 miles of the Santa Cruz branch rail line from Pajaro to Santa Cruz, as well as to deliver 12 new miles of coastal rail trail. Next slide. The project concept development has now reached milestone 3 on our screen there. As shown on the slide, milestone 3's major developments include ongoing refinements to the conceptual alignment, station locations and amenities, and the project's approach to ridership forecasting. The project concept report will, culminate next year with a final project concept report, which will occur in mid-year next year. And we'll get to the next steps and later on in the slide. But that project concept report will define, evaluate, and develop a project rail and trail build concept that will be advanced into subsequent project tasks. Next slide. So milestone 3, during this milestone, the project team changed its course a little bit on how we approached the public engagement opportunities. We heard a lot of feedback from the prior 2 milestones that the commission wanted to hear and see more information prior to a public hearing. So we changed the approach to hold community information sessions, a community workshops, the virtual open house in advance of this public hearing. That way the information that we're talking about today has already been available and discussed in public settings and formats prior to getting to today. Something also that we changed this time was the informational sessions that I mentioned. These are technical sessions that have technical information that we were able to present via webinars to the community. They were on October 23rd and October 28th. And then we have a third one scheduled for December 16th next, 2 Mondays next. They are regarding funding and service opportunities and approach, the ridership modeling approach, and the next one will be on noise impacts and quiet zones. And on the information packet that goes with this item, there's information on the first two sessions, as well as links to where you can see recording. And the recordings for those webinars are also available on the virtual open house. With the virtual open house, it launched on November 7th. The virtual open house talks about the things that I just mentioned before. It just goes over the funding, service, and approach, ridership modeling. It also talks about the ongoing alignments that we've had or refinements to alignment that we've had. Talks about the station locations and amenities, and a variety of different options. Okay. I think you guys orderly make your way outside the
I
building.
think we are going to need to evacuate the building for now. It looks like it's a tsunami warning, so I think. Okay, hold on. All right. Okay, I guess we don't need to evacuate for a tsunami warning, but anyone who is listening online who is on the coast, we do encourage you to ensure that you are in a safe place. Yeah, anyone who is in a coastal water area, please find a safe place for yourself. Do we need to take a quick break? Does anyone need to reach out to anyone to make sure that they're all safe? We're okay? All right. Been an interesting, you live upriver? Okay. It's been an interesting meeting. Okay. We're gonna continue. Please continue.
All right,
Thank
will
you.
do. Thank you, Chair Brown. So we had the open house. It's online, available for visiting. Goes through December 20th. All of the information that is on the virtual open house we'll go over in the rest of this presentation. So we'll get to those as we come to them. We had community workshops on November 12th and 13th, where we gave a presentation to the audience, the attendees, and also had on the picture, the slide below, opportunity for attendees to participate in 3 different activities at those workshops, where we had all of the maps that were changed or had refinements to the alignment available to discuss and go over with staff and the project team. We had an activity about station locations. We had an activity about station amenities. So we received a lot of attendance and a lot of feedback through those workshops. And then we do have today's public hearing as well. Next slide. So at this point, I wanted to give a brief overview of some of the things that we're discussing. I'll get into the details on those things in subsequent slides, but then also touch on a few of the general pieces of feedback that we've been receiving from the community and through these engagement opportunities. So on the screen there are the different elements that we'll be going through today. And on the bottom there are the workshop activities that I just mentioned that we went through. The things that we heard, generally speaking, regarding the project are support for pursuing a project concept that maximizes funding opportunities. This includes local, state, federal opportunities for funding. We also heard general feedback about opposition to the project based on concerns regarding cost, operations, and feasibility. We also had specific questions from the community about different elements of the project that will be addressed in later tasks of the project, things that would come out through your preliminary engineering, environmental, and right-of-way tasks of the project. We also had various concerns about different elements that I'll talk about in the upcoming slides, but also a key one that came out through this engagement opportunity is access for beach access. So one of the things that a lot of the community members have talked about is using the train to access beach facilities and opportunities, and it wasn't originally envisioned as specific in the project concept, but seeing the community interest that we've had in some of those features and stations, where we brought them into the milestone 3 opportunities for public engagement. Next slide. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is touch on the three main kind of elements of the project milestone 3. We'll go through the alignment updates first, and then I'll give an overview of the specific locations where there's been critical refinements or specific refinements, and then I'll get into some of the feedback that we've received on it. So going from Pajaro North, we have specific refinement for segment 18. So it's very important that segment 18 continue to progress and be able to serve the community in a way that it meets the project goals and objectives, but also the needs of the community. So one of the things that we heard, as I mentioned before, was beach access and specifically also trail access that would provide connections to beaches. So segment 18, we've developed alternative options for segment 18A, I think it's called. Sorry if I'm wrong on that. But it would be an alignment that includes a trail along Beach Street, West Beach Street in Watsonville. So we have some maps that are available online to view on those refinements, as well as they were available at the community workshops. Up in segment 13, the trail options for alignments along Sumner Avenue. So the key thing here, and these are also available on the maps for further detail, are taking an opportunity to utilize the adjacent right-of-way for Sumner Avenue as a potential location for the segment 13 of the trail. That would, for one thing, remove the requirement for 2 large bridges over 2 of the gulches there. It would not be locating the trail in the road, but it would be adjacent to the existing road. There would be some need for reconfiguration of the road potentially, but it would be a high-class facility adjacent to the road. It also would potentially limit some of the environmental impacts for the trail along the corridor in that location. Moving north, there's Cabrillo Station. So part of the intent of this project and going through the refinement of the alignment was looking for opportunities to improve the ridership experience as well as address safety and time travel concerns. And in this particular area right near New Brighton, there's the corridor is very curvy. There's got several reverse curves. The train through there would have to go very slow and would not be a great user experience going through that area. So there's some maps with 3 different options. One would be the existing alignment. Second would be actually moving the rail alignment out of the railroad right away to go north along McGregor Avenue. And there would be a station up along McGregor Avenue, either alongside it on the south side or on the north side of McGregor. And it would be an aerial version that would be between the highway and McGregor Drive. And both of those options would also have the ability to better serve the connection to a key destination. The reason for an elevated versus an at-grade version there are just the challenges with regards to Estates Drive and that crossing, as well as going through the public lands there near New Brighton. And then at Capitola near 41st and Jade Street Park, there are maps available that show 3 different options. So at this location, there are challenges with respect to the right-of-way corridor. It's narrow. We've talked about it a lot. From 30th to 47th, there's a narrow corridor. There's not enough space within the existing corridor to fit both the passenger rail facility and the trail facility and meet the design requirements as we've currently established them to be. So 3 options would be, 2 options are available for viewing that would bring the alignment out, the trail alignment out of the rail corridor. One would go north to Brommer Street and along Brommer and then through Jade Street Park. That's why we call them the Jade Street Park area. Another would be a closer alternative, bringing it through some surface streets nearer to the rail line in response to feedback we heard in milestone 2 about concern of keeping that facility as close to the existing right-of-way as possible. The third option is keeping both facilities within the existing right-of-way, and then we would have to, through preliminary engineering and right-of-way tasks, figure out how we would achieve that. And the last option we have available for viewing are those in front of the boardwalk and along Beach Street in Santa Cruz. And just as a summary, there are 4 alternatives available for viewing. 2 of them I would call at-grade versions, where one option has it come underneath the flume ride and then go north into the landscaping area and then into Beach Street, running the boardwalk, and then travel west from there. Another at-grade version would have a realignment of the bridge over the San Lorenzo River to bring the alignment of the tracks north of the flume ride to avoid that. And that would go over the parking lot for entrance for the easternmost parking lot for the boardwalk, and then would come down into the Beach Street right away and travel along Beach Street going west from there. Both of those options have another iteration, which is an elevated version, where instead of having it travel at grade through the street, it would be elevated all the way in front of the boardwalk and then come down and meet the existing grade before hitting the roundabout. Now, the challenges through this area are obviously we've got a high level of pedestrian activity. There's safety concerns about how, with the passenger rail service, how would we provide safety for pedestrian crossings of the rail line? The elevated versions provide one way of addressing that, where pedestrian crossings could be underneath the rail line. The at-grade versions being pushed further north into the street would allow a different way to address those safety concerns. Another concern is emergency access. So access to the boardwalk for emergency vehicles was expressed during engagement with stakeholders. And currently access is over the tracks in front of the Coconut Grove, and then they come along in front of the boardwalk. So both of the options would allow for that emergency access to continue to be made available to the boardwalk, either through an existing or through an at-grade crossing or underneath an elevated structure. So that summarizes the different alignment refinements that are kind of key and critical. And then on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what we've heard. So this is a screenshot of what the virtual open house looks like. There's several questions that are on this page regarding how you might use the rail line, how you might access the rail line, what stations you might use, if you would use different amenities. I'll get into the kind of station specific ones later in the presentation. But what we've heard is that there are specific concerns about some of these alignment revisions. There's been support for an alignment that provides better access to the community college at Cabrillo. There's been concern about the options in front of or in Capitola. We've heard both sides of the table there. There's not really a good option through there that would satisfy all the concerns. In front of the boardwalk and in B Street, we've heard a lot of concerns regarding safety, access to key facilities, access to the boardwalk, traffic patterns. We've heard concern from Roaring Camp about the current use of the rail line and how they bring the breach chain through there, and interest and concern from the community about some of these key businesses and services that are viewed as part of the community nature and the character of Santa Cruz County. So we are definitely taking all of that input. We've heard that input. We're looking for ways, we're continuing to look for ways to meet those challenges and address the concerns that are being raised. And one of those key forums is here to hear concerns from and input from the commission, and as well as the public to be able to provide input and feedback. Next slide. And that brings us next to potential station locations. So one of the things that we heard loud and clear in Milestone 2 was interest in exploring stations that were not the original ones that were put forth in the initial parts of this project concept development. So we've been asking the community questions about which stations they're would most likely use, how they would access them, and then additional stations that were identified through the public engagement process, which of those might they regularly use? So there are stations such as one at Manresa, a station potentially at Alone Parkway, and a variety of different ones that visitors to the online open house would be able to provide input on. One key one that I wanted to highlight is down in Watsonville. So normally at a project concept stage, you would site your stations no closer than a mile to each other. That's just typically ridership you want to keep the stations farther apart and less frequent so that you can continue to have good travel times. But we've heard a lot of feedback about the interest for having one at for the downtown near the historic depot, as well as one at Alone Parkway. And we're going to look at how do we, is there a balance there? Is the gain in ridership that would be achieved by having 2 stations worth the kind of the cost and travel time? So those are things that we're going to explore, and we definitely want feedback on it as well. And then there's other questions about station locations in the online open house. 2 of them are Cabrillo Station that we mentioned before. So is there an interest in a strong preference in one versus the other of those 3 options, either one on the existing corridor or up along McGregor? And then at the end of the line, as we call it. So during the public engagement and stakeholder process from Milestone 2 to now, there's been a strong interest in how do we best serve the downtown connections for Santa Cruz. Downtown, there's a downtown expansion plan, the South of Laurel plan, which having a station at the historic depot would better serve people that are using it from ridership from that location. And then how do we balance, and does that affect how people would connect to it from other locations using existing metro services, for instance, versus what would the ridership be from the west side? There's also, we've heard a very strong interest from the community about access to the west side. So those are questions that we're asking and want to get feedback on. Next slide. And lastly, we have up there station amenities and features. So there's an opportunity to provide comment on what type of features you'd want to see at the stations. So some of the things we've heard from the community thus far are restrooms, connection to bus and transit, connections to the rail trail, bike sharing, and retail at stations. So those are things that we are receiving, and we want to hear more feedback from it. Next slide. And then that comes to our next steps. So as I mentioned earlier, December 16th, we're going to have another community information session webinar that will be talking about quiet zones and noise impacts. We're going to receive the feedback through Milestone 3, and we'll continue to refine the conceptual alignment along with other project components that we're continuing on through development. Regarding the input and feedback we received through Milestone 2, we'll come back to the commission at a later time to provide a summary of what what feedback we heard and what inputs we received. And we are planning, as Director Christensen mentioned, an information sessions in the new year regarding ridership forecasting results, maybe operations modeling and cost estimating, how those things occur. And then Milestone 4, community engagement, will begin at the end of this upcoming winter, where we have a draft project concept report and a draft probable conceptual cost estimates. Next slide. And that brings us to conclusion for the presentation. Thank you very much. I'll be available for any questions that you might have. And we also have our project team consultants on the line in case there's some technical questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you for that presentation. So you showed a map of the rail line, stops, so forth. From 100 feet, what does a trip from, say, Watsonville to Santa Cruz look like in terms of how many, let's say a lot of these stops came into fruition. How long would it take? How long at each location waiting? I guess I'm a little bit, and what kind of impacts on the local traffic would each of these stops have? I just kind of want to get a general sense of what this is, what success looks like, defining what that is, because in some ways, just the overall concept of a train is very attractive to people, but as we know, sometimes details get in the way of satisfaction. So just curious as to, give me a sense of what this looks like.
Sure. So first off, with respect to some of the stations that have been identified as potential additional stations, many of them would not be regular service, so they wouldn't be serviced by trains regularly from Pajaro to Santa Cruz. Maybe they would be seasonal stations or weekend stations or stations that you wouldn't use on a typical like Monday through Friday period. So
And why is that? I mean, if you look at Metro, they're making really, really hard decisions and trying to say, hey, we're so interested in 15-minute intervals for people and making sure that it's reliable to reinforce the idea that this makes sense for me to take a train, a bus, or whatever. And anything that interrupts that reliability affects ridership, right? Because if it's not constant and not consistent, people lose confidence in that system. Am I right?
So those are similar things that we're thinking of. Yeah. So what, we talk a lot about in the ridership modeling approach webinar, talk a lot about modeling human behavior is complicated and trying to figure out in these models how people would use a transportation facility once implemented. There's a lot that goes into it, and you're doing your best to predict that. Our initial goal when we set out for this project concept development was consistent with the TCA and similar previous studies was our headway. So service going from Pajaro to Santa Cruz every hour, and vice versa, going from Santa Cruz to Pajaro on the hour. Our ridership forecasting and our operations modeling, which we're going through right now, and we're going to be coming back in early next year with kind of the results of those through those information sessions I mentioned. We'll drill down into some of those gritty details, like how long you dwell at the stations and how many stations there are, and what you need, as I mentioned, regarding Ohlone Parkway and the Watsonville downtown station conversation. We're going to look at, is the ridership gain from having that additional station, how does that balance, and what's the benefit versus the travel time cost, and the effect that ultimately, if you push out the ridership too much, is going to impact your ridership. So doing my best to answer the question there. So maybe back in the rails, but that's the process we're taking.
So then basically best scenario then, a trip from, again, getting back to Watsonville to Santa Cruz, is it a 20-minute trip? Is it a 15-minute trip? Is it a 35-minute trip? Best guess.
I don't think we have that detail yet. Detail for that will come out in that information sessions that we're going to be planning. So the operations modeling will be very key in taking in very specific things about what train we're going to model using, for instance, and what stations we're going to use, and the curvature of the line. So I think we'll have more information soon, but we don't have the answer yet.
Commissioner Schiffer?
I'm going to ask a question with a similar problem that Commissioner Johnson just raised. Not there yet. But I'm wondering about the end of the road. What is the final feasibility study? I guess my concern is it just going to be, this is our recommendation for feasibility approach that could then get to the next step? Or is it going to be, this is our recommendation, but here's alternative A or B? Are there going to be alternatives? Because I think it's been interesting listening to the presentation that for a number of areas, there are options. And it may well be that by the time you get to the end, you will have resolved all the public concerns about all the options except the one that will be recommended in the report. Somehow I doubt that. So I'm just wondering whether at the end, the commission's going to have one proposal to decide, yes, we want to move forward with that. No, we want to do something different. Or will the commission have a choice between, you can go with this one, and this is what the costs are going to be, this is what the effects are going to be, or you can go with this one, I'll have that information so there'll be some ability for the commission to sort of decide and hear from the public about what the public wants in terms of, well, there are going to be trade-offs. Obviously, more stations you put in, effect on ridership. Where it's located, it's going to have effect on, is there going to be a trail on the right-of-way or is there going to be a trail off the right? And I think that ultimately, it should be the commission that makes those decisions to the extent that there are different impacts, but they're really policy decisions about what the commission wants to do as opposed to technical decisions about what's feasible. So it's sort of a long-winded way of asking the question about what the final feasibility report is going to.
I think I understand that question. So first off, we'll have an opportunity again to get feedback in the milestone 4. So milestone 4 will have our draft probable cost estimates for review as well, where we're gonna also plan an information session, as I mentioned, that discusses kind of how those cost estimates are developed. You get into some of the detail for those who may wish to get into some of the detail. So there will be opportunity then as well to provide comments that may be reflective of some of the costs that we're seeing at that time. But ultimately, the answer for is there going to be one alternative or are there going to be options? I think it's going to be yes and yes. So the intent, and given what we're seeing through the project concept development so far, is to make a recommendation on what a project concept alternative alignment is. However, we're seeing that there is likely going to be the case where a lot of the questions that have been raised regarding some of the impacts for environmental impacts, for instance, other impacts that may occur and be fleshed out through the environmental document, it's likely that we're going to have to bring alternatives through to see better flesh out what those impacts may be. So I think it's going to be an alternative that is recommended through the project concept, but in key areas, some alternatives that we're going to carry through into the next tasks.
Thank you.
Question, I'll foreshadow my question and come back to it. My question is going to be, how do we get the genie back in the bottle? And if everyone goes to these meetings and drives home, and they will be driving for now, with their own perception of what the rail line is going to mean to them, we'll never reach consensus. We already have right-of-way issues, property owning issues with the current plan. And if we start telling the people who live on Sumner that, by the way, there's going to be a bike trail down Sumner or on McGregor, how will we ever get our hands around every permutation and combination of the possible plan? I'd like to urge that when we go to the public, we have a fixed menu and not a finite menu. And with every permutation and combination we bring forward, the cost is going to go up exponentially. And I don't think we should be offering the public things we can't reasonably afford or deliver on. So what I guess I'm asking for is a little bit of discipline on what's brought to the public and not a completely clean slate. We can barely address the challenges and needs of the right-of-way we currently have. It's a little spooky to think that we're offering new right-of-ways in areas we haven't even considered. So I'm very worried that we are inviting the public to comment on things we have no confidence we can deliver on, and we're driving decisions on a sample size of 80 attendees. We need real data and real discipline if we're going to engage the public in a meaningful conversation. So I'll loop back to my question, how do we get this genie back in the bottle?
I could attempt to take that. Thank you, Commissioner Quinn. You are right. This project is a very large project for our county. It is an ambitious project for our county. And, you know, through the development of major capital projects, we obviously want to look at all the options and then, you know, narrow down and, you know, basically refine the project based on, you know, balancing the risks, deliverability risks of projects. And right now we're kind of, you know, we've casted a large net, but you know, there's going to have to be some trade-offs and compromises that happen over time in order to make this project come to fruition. So we're pretty early on. We're not quite there yet to be making, you know, these sorts of policy decisions that you mentioned and that Commissioner Alternate Schifrin mentioned in his comments. But we are, you know, really at the point where we're trying to get public input and understand the needs of the community and trying to get as much engagement as possible in order for the commission to understand, you know, what are the constraints, what are the costs, what are our options, and, you know, refinements are coming. We're just not there yet. So, you know, we're here to take all of these comments, and we have the impossible job of developing this, you know, project and juggling all of the options, but that's our intent, is to be, you know, transparent with all of the opportunities as well as the constraints on this project and manage the risks accordingly so that we can make this project come to fruition.
Additional comments, Commissioner Montesino?
Yeah, well, you know, I work for the transit, district, so I'm in the transportation business. And my question is in regards to ridership. You know, is it going to give us a projectable outcome? Because the rail line doesn't, you know, doesn't go through, you know, any of the employment hubs, which are Cabrillo, UCSC, the county. The only employer that it kind of goes by is the boardwalk, and the boardwalk is low-paying jobs. You know, be kind of hard for, you know, some kids to be able to afford to ride the train. So is, you know, is it a wish stream to get some, you know, parameters, or is it going to be, you know, when you at that station, you're going to have to transfer, you're going to have to walk about, like I said, just question.
I'll do my best. I don't know that there's a direct question there, but it will. So ridership forecasting, as I mentioned before, you know, with the demand, the model for Santa Cruz County that we're recommending and as our approach, we'll look at how ridership is used throughout the whole corridor. So it's going to look at how people use transportation facility and transportation options in Santa Cruz County, and including this particular project concept. So it will have specific ridership information from specific areas to other locations. So you can, you know, you can drill down into trips generating from this location in Watsonville to this location over here somewhere else on the branch line. So we will have a lot of data that will come out of that.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. I want to follow up on the demand question, or really just sort of an emphasis that, well, actually, I mean, I think at least half of us sit on the Metro board. And so, you know, my fellow commissioners who do that can back me up here. We have actually quite good data on the demand between Watsonville and Santa Cruz. We've got 3 routes that serve both cities that go from one downtown to the next. We have the 1, we have the 2, and we have the 90X. Now, the 1 and the 2 are seeing some pretty decent ridership. I'm looking at the demand right now in terms of, you know, boardings per hour. The two averages 28.1 users per hour. The one averages 22.8. But those are also intercity routes that have a lot of stops near employment hubs. The 90X, which goes from one downtown to the next, express, actually is our second least well-performing route, worst performing route. It has only 4.7 riders per hour. And so I think any demand model absolutely needs to consider the data we actually have for demand along this route. And also, I mean, kind of to Commissioner Johnson's point, really needs to consider, well, is riding on the train going to be faster? Is it going to be slower? How is that going to impact demand as well? And if there is an argument that, you know, somehow we're going to see higher ridership on a train, because I understand that riding on a train can be more comfortable, you know, less swaying. Maybe, you know, people, I have heard some, I think there's data out there that shows people generally prefer to ride on a train if given an option between train and bus. And so if there is an argument that ridership will be higher on the train, let's actually pull data from other regions that can demonstrate that. I think my understanding is it's consistently a problem that with these kinds of services, ridership is overestimated and then underperforms. And so I think in this case, we're lucky that we have so much data about transit ridership between the regions that will be served by this service, and would really hope that that plays a large role in any demand estimations. Okay. Just a couple more questions or points. One, has the boardwalk provided any feedback on their preference for any of the alignments? I mean, obviously both as a major employer and you know, driver of tourism in our region, I'm sure, I know I myself and many members of this commission will care strongly about any of the boardwalk's feedback on which alignment is optimal.
Sure. We've met as a project team and as the RTC staff with boardwalk representatives multiple times over the course of project concept development. Sarah, Ms. Christensen, do you mind mentioning what specifically we have heard from them?
Well, they're not the only, you know, stakeholder, if you will, in the Beach Street area. So what we've done as a team is try to balance all of the constraints along that area. One of which, you know, their biggest concern is the safety of their guests. And so that's definitely a consideration for the project, which is one of the reasons why we're looking at an elevated structure rather than an at-grade structure. You know, we have to also balance, you know, the local traffic flow, because if we're looking at, you know, moving the alignment into Beach Street, you know, that could affect parking, that could affect, you know, the local street network. And, you know, Coastal Commission also, you know, has a say in, you know, and has opinions about what, you know, that area looks like as well. You know, emergency services, as Mr. Gerbrandt mentioned earlier. So because of all of these, I would say the Beach Street area is probably one of the more challenging locations. That's why our team has been developing more options for the alignment, including vertical and at grade, including horizontal adjustments as well into Beach Street and along the existing right of way. So that's, you know, really a work in progress, but that's really why you see the multiple options that we have.
So I guess further along in this process, will we actually see some of the written feedback from any of the primary stakeholders, particularly in this, you know, heavily impacted Beach Street area? I mean, certainly you mentioned the boardwalk's not the only stakeholder. That's true. I mean, the new La Bahia Hotel comes to mind, major multi-million-dollar investment being made there. Would wonder how they feel about an elevated train going by. So.
The elevated option touches down before the La Bahia. But yes, you are right. There's a lot of development happening and a lot of considerations. You know, one of the things that they've expressed is, you know, obviously they're a major employer. So, you know, having that, the rail transit serve as an opportunity for their employees to use to access the boardwalk and not sit in traffic is definitely a benefit to them, but there are, there's pros and cons. So we're working through it. And in terms of written comments or written support or, information, obviously that's unknown at this time. We may, any stakeholder is, just like any community member, is allowed to provide input. So written or verbal. So
Fair enough. Expect we'll see some of those comments later on in the process then. Final question for now is just with some of the diversions on Sumner Street or Bromer and Jade Street, what would the trail facility look like there? Are we talking about similar to in front of the boardwalk, 8 feet wide, 4-foot travel lane, 2-foot buffer? Is there sufficient space on those facilities to put that in?
The the answer for segment 13 along Sumner is easier. There's quite a large existing right of way for Sumner Avenue through there. Also, in many locations, the rail corridor right of way and Sumner Avenue right of way abut, so they could straddle that. So there's a lot more options there. Again, as I mentioned, it wouldn't be in the street along that portion. It would be a dedicated, separated facility along segment 13. There's enough space for that type to occur.
Sorry, when you say not in the street, are you talking about providing a barrier in the existing 30-foot right-of-way on the street and separating it from the street that way? Or are you talking about actually acquiring additional right-of-way? Or
There wouldn't be a need to acquire any additional right-of-way, provided the county, who's given us some preliminary feedback. We've been working with the county roads team regarding what this would look like. But there wouldn't be a need for new right-of-way through that area. There's sufficient existing right-of-way for it to not be like a class 2 bike lane in Sumner. It could be adjacent to the road, but not in the road. But we don't have the amount of design that you're asking for. Is it a concrete barrier? Is it a landscaped area that provides that buffer in terms of a horizontal clearance? We don't have that level of information yet.
Okay. I know that, and you said Jade Street and Bromer are more complicated. I would point out with, I don't know if we talked about it here, or maybe it came up in a workshop, but it was raised to me by some constituents. If we are talking about diverting as early as 38th, the challenge I see there of trying to go north of the tracks is that several of those streets that cut over from 38th to 41st are actually private. Melton and Raposa there. And so there we assume would actually need to acquire right of way.
In terms of whether or not we would need to acquire right away, I'm not certain on it. Ms. Christensen, if you wanted to answer that, if you can. But we've had some preliminary conversations with some residents in the area with respect to that potential alignment. You're correct, it's not public right away at the moment, so there need be some sort of agreement, whether or not it would be acquisitions or an operating agreement or a maintenance agreement, something in place that definitely would establish the ability to be there and operate that facility, and then who does what in terms of obligations.
Okay, well, one final comment is, this idea that we're going to divert the trail onto surface streets for, we're talking about almost half the corridor at this point. But between large amount on Sumner, I know Park Avenue is being considered for a diversion by our county team that's doing the design work because of the extreme expense there. Going through the eucalyptus trees. Of course, obviously the Capitola Trestle, now the section along, to avoid the pinch at 41st. In the same way I mentioned, we understand that people generally prefer to ride on a train instead of a bus. Riding on an actual, rail trail that's in the corridor is preferable to riding on the street for multiple reasons. Primarily the sense of safety and being further away from fast-moving vehicles. And so I do have concerns that the public who's funding this through Measure D, the one that passed, the one that we all agreed on, where people said we want a rail trail, that people would feel somewhat shortchanged if what we end up with is a facility that 50% of it is on surface streets. Thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had one question also about the Jade Street Park trail line, and states that the third option would keep the trail adjacent to the rail alignment through areas of the corridor where existing right-of-way width is insufficient. So what would that actually look like? Right-of-way or shrinking the trail?
Sure. So at this point, I mean, there are options for that one in the future as well. At this point, the desire and the goal is to keep designing both facilities to the existing guidance standards. So for the trail, it would be the Highway Design Manual with the 8-foot trail with 2-foot shoulders on each side. What we will discover more as we go through preliminary engineering and go through the right-of-way process is where do we have opportunities to gain back some of that width to limit the amount of impacts to existing properties. So as we mentioned before in previous presentations and discussions, right now we're in the conceptual stage with regards to the horizontal safety clearances and the requirements that come from the California PUC. As we progress through the design progress, we'll get more clarity on where we have some wiggle room in that area. So we will get more information, but there will need to be a choice at some point about the standard that we are using for development of facilities and those impacts to the existing properties.
Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. I have some other, mostly I was going to save my questions and comments, but since people are really going for it, I'm going to raise a question and a concern related to the west side, city of Santa Cruz. So, I've had many people ask me about, when did this decision get made that the service wouldn't continue to the west side, particularly given that we've got a lot of residents over there who might want to use it for commuting, but we also have a north coast segment and we've been planning and build engineering and building now towards a rail trail for the whole length of the tracks. And so people are asking, well, how did this decision get made that the west side would be cut off and we would just end this at the depot? And, I was in a conversation, we had a study session with some commissioners, so I had heard some of the rationale around considering that decision or bringing that in. But I don't think, and maybe at the open houses, I wasn't able to attend those, but I don't really see any explanation of that. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more for folks who are looking at this from the city of Santa Cruz side. Why is that an option now on the table? And at what point will that decision get made? And what role will commissioners play in deciding that?
Sure.
Again, kind of back around to Commissioner Schifrin's point at the beginning about how we decide particular elements of this which are significant.
Thank you. I'll give some context and a little bit of the answer, and then we have Mark McLaren from HDR Consultants on the line. I think you got him. Okay. So you're right that the initial conceptual alignment that we put forward in milestone 2 had the alignment going all the way to the west side, to Natural Bridges Drive. And just to clarify, there has been no decision made about whether or not there's service is ending in the downtown area or extending to the west side. What we heard in milestone 2 was particularly from some staff at the city of Santa Cruz, we and going through a ridership analysis, or getting the data for our ridership analysis, there's a key kind of community concern about that connection to downtown Santa Cruz, and particularly expansion of downtown Santa Cruz south of Laurel, and a lot of the kind of projects in the pipeline in that area, and how a downtown station located at the historic depot could really serve those communities really well. And then we also hear about connections to the west side. So really, at this point, there's no decisions been made, but really it's coming out to the commission and to the community with, hey, these are things that we heard in milestone 2 that are valid concerns of the community and the stakeholders. So we want to hear feedback as to how people would be using the facility, and would there be a difference between the 2 locations. Mark, pass it over to you.
Thank you, Riley. So I think just to expand upon that, when we look at these 2 different alternatives, there are advantages and disadvantages to both. And clearly, there's a lot of interest in going to West Santa Cruz, but going through the neighborhoods where the trail has been built and where a train would operate more frequently in close proximity to a number of the residences that are in that area. Those are all considerations that we have to work through as we look at railroad operation safety and just the overall design of the system, and what is the benefit that's gained by going to that area versus the interest that we heard from others about going to the area, the location of the historic depot and the depot park in Santa Cruz. As we go through the process of looking at ridership and looking at costs and the trade-offs of those 2 alternatives, we'll be coming back to you with the information to review and to provide feedback on to help make that decision in terms of what the most prudent is, with the understanding that we still have the ability, and it would be purposeful to go through the environmental document process with alternatives on the table for the end of the line, given some of the concerns that exist on the alternatives, regardless of which one we choose. Riley?
Thank you, Mark.
Can I ask a quick follow-up then? I just want to be clear here. This is being framed as either the depot or the west side. Is that the conventional wisdom among the team here, that it would be either or, not both?
Well, there is, so in terms of operations, there are a little bit more ability than just that. They become challenging, however. So the key differences is the proximity of connection at the downtown depot. So there's a key thing there. Will the ridership show, given the modeling and kind of the growth forecast, that's a really big hotspot versus the growth that's could potentially happen along the corridor to the west. There's 2 permutations on that. One, you could have an A service and a B service. So service could go to the depot on some runs and extend to the west side on others. And there's also an option for scaled implementation of service. So a service that goes to the depot in downtown Santa Cruz initially, and then could extend to the west side in the future.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, at this time, we will open the public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with those in the room. Hello, welcome.
Thank you to the chair, members of the commission. My name is Jeffrey Ellis, longtime resident of Santa Cruz County, District 1. My concern here is that I haven't heard even a ballpark figure what this thing is going to cost, what it would cost me as a taxpayer. Would there be a property tax? Would there be a sales tax? Would there be a toll booth on Highway 1? I mean, what are you thinking about? I realize there's lots of details that need to be worked out before you can have a detailed cost estimate, but there should be a ballpark figure. And I'm sure you're talking about billions of dollars. That this is not going to be cheap. My second concern is about benefits. Now, there's been lots of talk about ridership estimates, ridership models. But the real question is, which riders are they going to be? Are they just going to be people who used to ride Metro and they like the train better? So you're changing riders from zero emission hydrogen buses over to zero emission train? Or are these going to be new riders who used to drive their cars? We need to hear the numbers, the ballpark estimates, especially on cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
Hi, Terry Thomas from Capitola. I attended the last workshop at Simpkins, and to find out that there's not going to be one train going one direction only, there are going to be 3 bypass areas, which were new to me, in some locations, and we don't know how wide they're going to be and how much they're going to cost, but the train will be able to pull off to the side so that the other train can go by. I hope you all know that. If there are 23 or so bridges or overpasses that need to be repaired, they're only big enough for a train to go through. So where does the pedestrian and bicycle path go? Is there accommodation for paying for access to the road from the train track where that bypass is, or how is that going to work out? I really didn't, when I went to the workshop, when they were talking about station amenities, they didn't really talk about parking. I think that's really important because people are probably going to drive from their house to the station to get on the train. That needs to be taken into consideration. Paying for that area needs to be accommodated. Also, who and how are we going to be paying for maintenance and the cost of employees in the future? That hasn't been addressed that I know of. And the RTC is now currently putting in a bus turnout at Park in Monterey and Capitola. And they stopped bus service on Park Avenue 5 or more years ago because there was nobody on the bus. So I don't know why you're going to do that. And I'm saying, let's put this to the vote of the people again, when you know what the costs and the real cost is going to be to people that live here.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for all the work you've done on this. I'm totally impressed by it. And it sounds really complicated. It's been an interesting meeting today. For ridership, because of the traffic that goes between Watsonville and Santa Cruz and the traffic problems that we're having there, I really do believe and feel that at least during the rush hours, that there should be access to the west side for UCSC staff and for students who have to live out of this area because they can't afford to live in the Santa Cruz area. It's great to have the idea of having people using the trails off of the rail trail, and of tourists coming to the boardwalk is a great idea. But for the rush hour traffic and for the amount of impacted traffic that we have on the highways, I think that more stations in Watsonville and more stations in Santa Cruz, and the ones in between not being used during rush hour at least, would be great. And some sort of access to that, to those stations, either by the rental bikes, the e-bikes, or by shuttles or something that would go up and down to the university frequently, more frequently maybe than the buses that are so huge and often empty. Anyway, I'm just concerned about the stations on each end during rush hour, a way to alleviate all of the traffic on the freeways during rush hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you for all your hard work, staff. I just want to speak for myself personally. I would have, as a young mom taking kids, I used to coach kids, almost every day I would have been on that train. And if the train was here today, I'd be on it almost every day. It goes to all the places that I love to go, parks, schools, shopping, West Side, Venus, partying with girlfriends, all that kind of stuff. There are significant complexities in designing details for an excellent transportation system while ensuring that we, the public, have a comprehensive grasp of what is being proposed so we can offer well-informed insights and suggestions to the initial and iterative designs. During the November 13th public meeting, it was hard to decipher the rail service design plans and know what, how, and why many decisions were being made. We suggest additional stepwise public engagements, which I hear is going to happen, and opportunities to hear from and ask questions of the design experts ongoingly. We'll provide more detailed feedback in writing prior to the deadline, but I'd like to mention a couple items that pertain to equity. In a model where equity is interwoven into all of our governmental projects and processes from their foundation, equitable access to opportunity becomes a critical lens influencing the kind of questions we ask. Key questions we should ask include, where are our greatest concentration of commuters coming from and going to? Looking at key data available to us, we see two areas in the entire county that are extremely concentrated with thousands of commuters, and yet one of those locations is not even included as a targeted rail stop, although I did hear it mentioned earlier. Downtown Watsonville and the Ohlone Park area in Watsonville hosts a majority of daily commuters which travel to North Santa Cruz County to work, and this is a key equity point. I just want to also mention in response to door-to-door access, I think is a false. We need to be able to walk some distance, about 15 minutes to get to our buses and trains. Another concern is that the current design plans seem to completely miss rail stops between West Side and Natural Bridges. Thank you so much. I also believe this is an equity issue of getting Watsonville residents all the way to Natural Bridges. Thank you.
Hi, welcome.
Hello, my name is John Lewis. I am a resident here in Scotts Valley. Thank you for taking the time today for public comment and feedback. I absolutely appreciate it. I'm a student at Cabrillo College. I'm going through a mid-career skills refresh, and I'm engaged with a number of classes at Cabrillo, and I have for multiple semesters. Sometimes it takes me 45 minutes to get from Scotts Valley to Cabrillo College to attend class. That is terrible. I also have talked to a number of people who are my classmates who commute in from Watsonville and beyond, and they've made mention that maintaining the cost of their vehicle while they're trying to go to school to get skills to get a job that will afford them a life in this area is very difficult, and their transit options are also terrible. I speak today with a voice of support for the train and all of the access it will bring. I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area when I was younger. That is where I was born. I used to hop on BART in Pleasant Hill and go into Berkeley and see friends and attend concerts. And I would also go and take classes that were available to me through BART, and it extended and enhanced my life. My son is growing up here in Scotts Valley, and I want him to have more opportunities than I had. I want to build a world that I'm proud of for my son. I've heard so many people saying so many bad things about this project when it is foundational to the survival of this region to be able to have something beyond just a car. It costs the average person $8,000 a year to maintain a car, to put gas in that car, to maintain that car, to pay for parking, to pay for everything that goes along with it. And the current cost of a house in Santa Cruz is $1.3 million, and that's $10,000 a month. We need to figure out how to afford people a life here. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
I think it's still morning. Good morning, commissioners. My name's Matt Farrell. I'm here representing Friends of the Rail and Trail. I would just like to open by stating that the alternatives being considered in staff's presentation today, and I want to thank them for the work they've done on this, are all part of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Master Plan. Those alternatives are all in that document, and that document was approved by the Regional Transportation Commission. So these are not new ideas. These are something that are part of the history of the work on this effort to accommodate both the trail and the rail. In terms of specific comments on alternatives, Fort would like to reaffirm its support for maintaining mooring camps' access to the beach boardwalk. On Sumner Avenue, we're continuing to evaluate the proposed alternative that staff was mentioning, but we do want to say that we're opposed to the alternative that was included as one of the alternatives on Sumner Avenue that would use sharrows around Doris Avenue on Sumner. We're adamantly opposed to that. At West Beach and San Andreas, we support exploring this alternative and encourage RTC staff to continue working with the city of Watsonville and the county to make sure that they have agreement on the solution that's coming forward. Finally, I'd just like to remind folks that when the RTC went to the California Transportation Commission and received the funding to purchase the line, it was clearly stated by the Transportation Commission that we have an obligation to pursue rail on this corridor. So this is not something that we can walk away from, because that was our commitment when we agreed to take that money. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
Hello, Becky Steinbrunner. I live in rural Aptos, and thank you, Mr. Farrell, for bringing up that important piece. I wanted to also say the rail line was purchased for the purpose of providing passenger rail in the future. It was only later that the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail was added. And I think we have to recognize that in some areas, the two cannot be fit together. So as much as we hoped it could, I just don't think it's going to work. And a perfect example of that is, I'm going to leave this with you for the record, the HMH Santa Cruz Branch Line Mobile Home Encroachment Removal Analysis. This analysis is shocking. Those people, some of them, one would have to pay $175,000 to move their trailer. And we cannot do that for the purpose of trying to fit in a trail and a rail. I attended the Watsonville public session. I was very grateful for a formal presentation. I did not like having an open house format after that, and there were protests from others too. We want, as the public, we want a presentation. We want publicly question answer so that everyone has the benefit of hearing others' questions and those answers. It is critical that there is connection to Cabrillo, because Cabrillo College is going to be building a more than 600 bed unit, and 40% of that is dedicated to UCSC students. So there must be some connection to that. It is unfortunate that the Mar Vista bike overpass was not put closer to that, as was recommended early on by a citizen group. I support launching now a quest for quiet zones, and my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will leave this. Who do I give this to?
This,
The attorney? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I would like it included in public correspondence in the future.
thank you.
Just a side note, that report is available on the RTC website.
Hi, welcome.
Good morning on another seismic day with the rail and trail. My name is Saladin Sale. I live on the west side of Santa Cruz. I want to applaud the progress the Commission and RTC staff are making in developing the details of our future rail transit system. As I've said before, this is a long-term legacy project, first to protect and then to fully utilize for public transit the priceless public resource, which is our already built north-south rail corridor right-of-way. It's been pointed out many times, there are only 3 transportation corridors along our narrow coast. We're presently only using 2. Many opponents still don't get it that rail transit does not have to reduce vehicle traffic on highways to be a success, because roads will always fill to capacity. The train and trail will serve those future residents who want to get off the road. My input this morning concerns stations. Watsonville needs 2 stations to be properly served, one near downtown, another at Ohlone Parkway. The northern end of the line needs to serve the growing business district, UCSC, and residents of the Santa Cruz West Side at Natural Bridges Drive. This would also be a natural terminus for UCSC shuttles and recreational passengers to access the North Coast trails, beaches, and parks. We have adult children and grandchildren in Aptos and travel 4 to 5 days each week between the West Side and Aptos. Would regularly choose rail for these trips. Please see that the eventual recommended system configuration maximizes ease of access for our growing population. Minimizing dwell time at stations through design should allow adding a few more stops with minimal impact on overall travel times. Thank you all.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sally Arnold. I'm a West Side resident. You can guess what I'm thinking about. I'm very excited that we're finally planning a passenger rail system for our county and planning to finish the rail trail all the way to Watsonville. This is great. I have concerns, though, that there seems to be kind of a tendency in some of these options to plan a very thin sort of system that doesn't fully utilize our rail line. We need to look at the data of where people are traveling to and from now and then select stops that will accommodate those needs. I know there's been concern that more stops will slow travel time and thus hurt ridership, but by that logic, a train with no stops would be very fast. But I don't think it's going to help ridership. But what we need is to remember that the train doesn't have to be super fast. It just has to beat the drive time on Highway 1. And that's a very low bar right now. The train needs to stop where people are or where they want to be, and this means stops at intersections, near bus routes and businesses, not mid-block and warehouse districts. The train needs to certainly serve the west side of Santa Cruz. There's tens of thousands of people who live within a mile of the tracks on the west side. There are dozens of businesses right near the tracks that would appreciate their customers and workers being delivered by train rather than having to build more parking lots. There are several job centers on the west side, including UCSC, and there are current bus routes from Bay Street and Natural Bridges Drive that could take students and workers to the university directly from that train stop. The proposal to stop service at Depot Park is deeply flawed. It would leave the west side stranded. Not serving the west side would be a great blow to the usefulness of the passenger rail system. The walk right now from the wharf to the depot is just not that far, for people who want to access downtown. It's like 2 blocks. Or maybe do both. Pause at the depot and continue to the west side, but don't leave out the west side. Thanks for your work on planning the rail system for our county, and I just urge you to design a system that includes stops where people live, work, and play.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon. Rail is the anchor of this project. Infill, we're building a lot of new homes in the county, and autonomous cars are not the answer. And it took many years I don't know how many decades it took for La Bahia to be built. It took over 12 years for the Laurel Curve underpass along Highway 17. This is a complicated project. And I agree that in Watsonville, we need to have the station at Ohlone Park and also downtown Watsonville. And I'm thinking, why don't we, because the rail is the anchor, build the trail to the end of section 11 and then get the rail built. That's why I'm here. I had staff that lived in Watsonville and Salinas before I sold my business that would lament how long it took them to get to work. And I've been retired over 10 years. And I also want to point this out. I received this in my packet when I bought my house, which was pretty close to the rail corridor. And within it, it is the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Corridor. It's a disclaimer saying if you're buying your property close to the rail trail, be advised of this. And it says the 32-mile is for rail and an afterthought is the trail. So please move forward with the rail project. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Mimi Edgar. I live in SoCal, and I really appreciate all the effort that's been put into this. I'm a proponent of the rail and trail, and I'm not here to talk about specifics. I know a lot of things are being worked out, but just the bigger picture. A few weeks ago on a program I listened to called Science Friday, they presented data which proves that widening highways does not work. It doesn't work. In the short term, maybe, but in the long term. And so I think we need to think about the future. You know, we're already adding a lane to Highway 1 between SoCal and Santa Cruz. And oh, that's going to be great for a little while. But, you know, I used to live in Los Angeles. There's no end to how many lanes you have to add to the freeway. So I think investing in rail as something for the future and, you know, it's just wise. It's like the handwriting's on the wall. Someone said we have, you know, we're only using 2 of 3 corridors now. So thank you very much. I'm excited about this. I have 5 grandkids who live here in Santa Cruz, and they're high school and college age, and they're like, okay, Grandma, you know, we want this. Go tell them. So I feel like the Lorax speaking for the trees, like, you know, this is an exciting project, and yes, it's going to cost money, but it's well, I think it's a good investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Paula Bradley. I'm a resident of Capitola. And I wanted to thank the RTC and staff for the workshops to encourage community participation in Milestone 3. I look forward to continued progress towards the completion of the coastal trail and rail for the future benefit of Santa Cruz County residents. The vision is that one day workers, residents, and tourists will have the option to take an electric passenger train to jobs, schools, shopping, and parks, and visit Capitola, where there's little parking and congested streets. We need a full service train with stops, including from Watsonville into the west side, that will be an integrated part of an overall multimodal transportation plan. In the meantime, I'll be riding my bicycle along the trail, segment by segment, and thank you. Let's keep moving forward.
Thank you. Any further comment in the room? Seeing none, we will go to Zoom. Okay, and we'll start with Brian People.
Hi, this is Brian Peoples with Trail Now. You know, it really feels like I'm watching the Simpkins cartoon, the monorail salesman coming in and trying to sell us a monorail. You know, the consultants haven't really provided the facts in the way of ridership and cost, and we're pretty confident what those ridership numbers are. We know them as Supervisor Koenig expressed, as Metro, and we've had multiple studies. Now, the most important thing that the consultant's not doing is showing the restrictions. And one of them, Supervisor McPherson requested that it be done, I think probably a year ago, is what is the Coastal Commission sea level rising and beach access restrictions? Because based off of what we're seeing, you're not going to be able to have a new passenger train that goes along the coastline. And so the idea of us designing and spending money on a design like this, it doesn't make sense. It's like building a house and not looking at your zoning requirements. We think that we need to step back and realize the rail consultants have already said that all the tracks and trestles can't be used. So the big issue, the real issue, is that we continue to delay using the corridor. We're hopeful that we start to realize that the fastest way to improve and open up that third corridor is to rail bank it, pull the rails, and make it a simple path. We're really hurting our community by delaying this, and we're seeing it with the FEMA denial. So please, hopefully we get through this. They provide the real numbers so that we can move on and use that corridor as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go now to Mr. Michael Saint.
Thank you, Chair Brown. Michael Saint, Aptos. And starting to feel like Brett Garrett's alter ego here. But personally, I don't feel the train passenger rail trail project study is the best direction to go for Santa Cruz County. I am supportive of public transit on the corridor, but I'm very supportive of using a personal rapid transit instead. The reason for that is smaller infrastructure. It's affordable, has nonstop service, and it's the only mass transit system to actually pull people out of their cars. After looking at a lot of the public comments and questions and listening today, a PRT system can eliminate a lot of these questions and issues that people have. I'll just give you a few examples. There's some comments I picked up from emails from the people today. The first question was station placement and facilities. Well, PRT does not have stations. They have access points. So we have a very small infrastructure there. So facilities with a station will not be necessary. Parking, it'll be very limited because of the amount of stations that a PRT can offer. I believe the Glideways presentation said there'd be over 50 stations in Santa Cruz County, thus eliminating a lot of parking. Restrooms and water fountains, well, those are not required because you're only going to be at the station for 3 to 5 minutes. So, you know, you could bring some water with you and go to the bathroom before you get to the station. Wi-Fi available, yes, there will be Wi-Fi available on the cars. Interactive train timetable announcements, timetable. There will be no schedule for PRT. You show up and you go in 3 to 5 minutes. Quiet zones, not needed. Changing alignment may also not be needed due to the small cars
Thank
as
you,
well
Mr.
as the
Saint.
lightness of the cars. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. We'll go now to Jocelyn Wolf.
Hi, I just want to apologize for leaving a comment in the wrong place. I was wondering if it's possible for that comment to be applied to this public comment section. My name is Jocelyn Wolf and I commented earlier.
Yeah, she commented on, can we
Right.
find a way for in the minutes to be applied to this? Yes, yes, no problem. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
We'll go now to Diane D.
Hello, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I had my comment ready and now I can't find it on my computer screen. Oh, what I had written a letter to the commission regarding this public hearing, and so I hope that they will read it. I am very much in favor of having a really convenient and well-utilized stop in Watsonville. The location of that stop is really, really important. And I'm also in favor of the West Side, whether it's an extension from the downtown or occasional intermittent going that far. I'm sorry, I don't have my written statement here, but I also want to say regarding looking at current statistics about Metro, Metro is a wonderful operation, greatly improved in the last few years. But I've tried to take Metro to Watsonville and other places in the county, and it gets stuck in traffic. So I don't see how you can use statistics from current ridership to project into 10, 15, 20 years from now what people are going to want to do. The current data really isn't relevant. The growth forecast for this county, we all know how the population is increasing, and also development forecasts should be considered with ridership. In the future, the most important thing is think of the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go now to Cynthia Zenzel.
Good afternoon. Thank you for all your work. I just wanted to make a comment on something that's bothered me for years, and that is the statements about the mobile home park encroaching on the rail line and the other residences encroaching onto the rail right of way. I don't think the owners of the mobile homes should be the ones carrying that burden. It's the mobile home park owners that were responsible for placing those homes where they don't belong. And just as in my neighborhood, if someone has built into an easement, they know at the time they do that, that at any time they will have to give up the buildings or structures they put in that easement. And I think that should be true along the rail corridor as well, that the decisions made by the RTC should not use those encroachments as a reason not to use the full width of the rail corridor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further public comments, we will close the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Sean. Sean, you should be able to unmute now.
Thank you. The downtown Watsonville specific plan is including housing by the rail line where they think there's going to be boarding. Those public meetings can be found on the City of Watsonville Facebook page. So rail keeps coming up over and over again in the meetings, and it's also in the chats. Surveys show that Watsonville bears the brunt of pollution from people because people drive through Watsonville, not to Watsonville. And so it's the physical trash, it's the air pollution, it's the noise pollution. Watsonville deserves better than to, we've got to recognize the use that its roadways get. We have a responsibility to lighten that load. Also, in 2017, there was a part of a massive and expensive project called Vision Santa Cruz County, where the county came to the public, had meetings all over the county to ask people what they need. What trends do they see? If you can go to YouTube, just put in Vision Santa Cruz County Davenport, and at 25 minutes and 42 seconds, there's a lot of talk about rail. That end of the county also gets left out of services, and they feel constantly abandoned, and they need the tourism for the family-run businesses.
Thank you. Okay, last call for public comment. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public hearing now, bring it back to the commission. This was just a presentation and a public hearing, but we are offered the opportunity to provide any input if there's any additional input.
Yeah, I'd just like to, good hearing that we had today, and next year when the commission considers the passenger rail concept, I think it's going to be in the spring or by the summer anyway. I hope that the result will be a real community dialogue, and we're having some of that now, and the financial and logistical information that we're looking at. I think the public needs to really fully understand all the impacts the commission has on this proposal for the rail service, and what the real cost will be, and how might that affect other transportation projects getting built as we speak, and what investments will do to improve the mobility and social equity in Santa Cruz. I really urge the commission, as this will be my last meeting, to show the voters who supported Measure D in 2016 that you're acting responsibly with their tax dollars, and by not trying to change the project formula that was established in that election, that was approved by more than 2/3 of the voters, in the future to backfill the expense of rail service alone. And I've been supportive of following through and getting the studies done to see what the impacts of rail service will be, how much it will cost through the years. And most of all, I really urge the commission to show the public that you are not willing to overspend on one project to the expense of other essential transportation needs that we have. I hear more about local roads. I think any city council member or board of supervisors member, that's what we hear more than anything, fix my roads. That was the top priority in Measure D of 2016. And as we speak, this commission just approved the building of the ultimate trail next to the existing rails, 8 through 12. Rails really can't be used for the community rail service in the future. That matters because we're going to spend $304 million more on those 4 segments to build the ultimate trail versus the more basic interim trail, just to preserve the rails that cannot be used for future commuter rail service. I'm really grateful that we're paying more attention to the South County segments, and the commission has prioritized those for the future funding, and my hope is that the trend continues. I'm really looking forward to the concept report and hearing about it, how much it's going to cost, a realistic estimate of how many people will really use it. If we can get a better read on that. Our community really deserves a cost-benefit approach and analysis to delivering the transportation projects that we promised them in 2016. This is it's been resulted in being a moving target, a more costly moving target. And I just want to make sure that we really address all transportation network services in the county as we make this decision on the rail line. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment since this is also my last meeting and I didn't speak about it, my outgoing remarks very much, but I do want to say, yeah, I really appreciate the high level of community engagement we've had around the rail trail project. And, you know, it's been, you know, controversial. It's been complicated. It's been politicized, and it's been called the, you know, the worst idea that's to ever come to town and the best idea that's ever come to town. And, you know, and yet we still have a lot more work to do to figure out the viability and the cost. But we also need to remember as we go through this that, you know, as many of our speakers have said today, and as I reflect on my time here, this stuff takes time. And the more, you know, naysaying we have and the more kind of interruption of the process of trying to figure out some answers, the more it becomes that moving target. And, you know, and the more challenged our staff will be to try to bring the commission something that can really provide the level of public benefit that we're looking for. And so I just want to appreciate the work that's going into it. I want to appreciate the advocates who have come out and reminded us that we are, again, and reminded me, just like Norm Hagen did all those years ago, we are planning for many years out. Let's not lose sight of that and keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I think it was Thoreau said, simplify, simplify. In some ways, I see more complications just arising, just from the comments, the um, various options that are there. It's a lot like a balloon. When you squeeze one area, kind of improve, and then it bulges somewhere else. And I think, you know, people who ask questions, and two people in the audience, I think it was Jeffrey Ellis and Terry Thomas, said, what's it gonna cost? I mean, give us an idea. That can't be poo-pooed as something being negative or whatever, because people have concerns. There's a certain negativity that if you ask questions about about costs, about reality, feasibility, and so forth, you're being an impediment. But you know, that happens in business each and every day. Feasibility is so important because people are putting hard-earned money, investors, and I think it's fair to say that the taxpayers are the investors in this equation of spending their money wisely. And also the whole idea of promises made, promises kept. You can talk all you want about, well, the train has to have the priority because it was dictated by the state of California when it was given funds. But nobody twisted anybody's arm in terms of including a trail because it made it more feasible that Measure D would pass, right? And now we have a situation where the trail realignment, the revisions are moving people around in where probably most trail traffic, bicyclists, pedestrians would use that trail. And so that's a diversion, that's a complication, and that's, you know, I think we want to stay on task in terms of, you know, meeting those promises and making sure that we don't all of a sudden diverge from that too much, because to me, I think keeping those promises is extremely important throughout this process. And again, I welcome people asking hard questions from the public, because I think what I heard today was, you know, a lot of staff work, a lot of, you know, public engagement. I'm not so sure how much it was progress, though, because there are just so many questions and so many complications associated with this that I'm hoping that they can be solved, but I'm not really totally optimistic about it. Thanks.
Thank you. A few comments. One, since this is a time for input on some of the options, I definitely prefer service to the west side. Support South County representatives in terms of how many stations in Watsonville. Thinking about it, I think it would be helpful as this moves forward, keep providing those options in whatever alternative to forward. I also wanted to mention in terms of going off the right-of-way, as I remember the original master plan, there was a recognition that there might be places where the trail had to go off the right-of-way, that there were real limitations to the right-of-way. And this is not unusual in trails. There are, from what I've learned in other parts of the country where there are rail trails, especially long ones, there are segments where they just don't work on the right-of-way. So while I think it would be preferable to have them, I don't think that that's the end of the world if there are segments where it really makes a big difference. So I think we need more information about those and what it's going to cost, what's, you know, the pros and cons. But I don't think it's inconsistent with the master plan to be considering. Finally, I want to say something about the feasibility study process. It struck me in listening to some of the comments from commissioners and public. It really is a dilemma of how you do a feasibility study. Sometimes you hire a consultant, they go out to do the feasibility study, come back, and there's a draft feasibility study. Then you open it up to public comment, and you get the people who hate it, and you get the people who hate it, and then make a decision. the criticism of that is that, well, why is this all done in the back room? Why don't we never know what's going on? We chose another approach, which was to have a very grand public input process. And the problem with that is that there are people who are frustrated because it is a process. They want answers now. How much is this going to cost? What's the ridership going to be? But the way this process has been set up, we're going to get the background information first, and it's going to be developed in a systematic way. And I think it's just important that public have patience with the steps in the process. There will be answers to the questions about ridership, cost. People may like it, they may not like it. We agree or may not agree, but we have to, we set up a particular set of tasks and decision points, or at least information points. I think that I want to compliment staff for moving through that process and providing the information that is supposed to be provided at the provided. We're going to get additional information and we'll have to deal with it when it comes forward. It's clear that there are going to need to be options for some of these decisions, as Commissioner Johnson said, are very complicated. This is a long rail line. It's something I would say when we did the master plan, as some of the others were, and I never anticipated the level of complications. This is definitely one of those examples where the devil is in the details, because the details have been overwhelming. And we have to go through them if we're ultimately. So I appreciate the fact that we have a lot of public input, sort of hope that people will be patient to let the process provide when it makes sense for it. Studies that are.
Any further comments from? Okay. With that, we will go now to item 23, review of items to be discussed in closed session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one item in closed session today, and we anticipate it'll be relatively brief session.
Thank you. We will now recess to our closed session. Thank you. I'm sorry, is there any public comment on our closed session items? Seeing none in the room, do we have any online?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay, seeing none online, we'll now recess to closed session.